Did you know that in the early 90s, Sega of America produced a Sonic Bible to ensure the Sonic series had consistent lore in the West? But the story was actually completely from the original Japanese games. Sonic's real name was Sonny Hedgehog, and he lived in Nebraska. Tonight, we'll talk about that and other dozens of carefully researched Sonic facts for you to fall asleep to. This is a very detailed retrospective of the franchise's history, made by a Sonic fan, for all of you who are also fans. The Sonic Bible was a truly weird thing. It imagined Sonic as Sonny Hedgehog, a small-town boy from Hartley, Nebraska in the early 21st century. He lived under a scraggly hedge with his mother and 5 sisters, subsisting on burger scraps and milkshakes. His father died due to toxic waste, motivating Sonny to become great. He practiced running between hedges, played pranks at the local bowling alley, and dreamed of achieving Olympic gold. Then, at the same time, Dr. Kintabor became Robotnik due to a failed experiment. Sonny also turned into Sonic. This early draft shows just how wild the early 90s Sonic canon used to be. Thankfully, the final Sonic isn't from Nebraska, but the Sonic Bible is still an entertaining, even if bizarre, what if. Continuing on exploring secret facts about Sonic's classic era, it's better to focus on the Japanese development side of things, which is not as weird, but equally as fascinating. Sega's most famous hedgehog started life as a character design competition entry. Sega needed a mascot to compete with Nintendo's Mario, so designers Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima pitched a character who could roll into a ball. He wasn't always blue or even a hedgehog. Early concepts included a rabbit, which is nowadays known by fans as Feels the Rabbit, a nice unofficial name. Let that sink in. This guy was almost the protagonist of Sonic. What's amusing is, he returned recently in Sonic Superstars as a special skin, which made the new fans of Feels the Rabbit very happy. Other early sketches, just a bit later into development, presented Sonic as Mr. Hedgehog. Some people think he was called Mr. Needlemouse at this point, which is false. Turns out, after all these years, Sonic's prototype name, Mr. Needlemouse, is a mistranslation of an early art sheet by his original character designer, Naoto Oshima. His actual prototype name is Mr. Hedgehog. When the series creator, Yuji Naka, asked about the name Mr. Needlemouse on Twitter, he was surprised because they always called him Mr. Hedgehog, as Needlemouse is a literal translation of the Japanese word for hedgehog, Haranazumi. At the time of Sonic 4 Episode 1 marketing, Sega of America started promoting the game as Project Needlemouse, which is funny, as it shows the misinformation spread to the point of Sega itself getting it wrong. The hedgehog design was finally chosen because his spikes looked like a weapon when he rolled, and the blue matched Sega's logo. His red shoes were a deliberate contrast. Oshima says it was inspired by Michael Jackson's boots and Santa Claus, using bright red and white against Sonic's cobalt blue. Even his personality came from Western culture. The designers wanted someone with attitude, so they modeled him after Bill Clinton's cocky confidence. Yeah, that's kind of amusing, but the Japanese had a strange admiration for Bill Clinton. These little choices gave Sonic a rebellious, cool edge that defined him in the 1990s. Next time you see him tapping his foot impatiently on the title screen, know that it all began with a contest and a desire to make a mascot who looked cool and unique. We've talked about the story behind Sonic's design, but what about Eggman? Well, if you've ever wondered why Dr. Eggman looks like a combination of a boiled egg and a round old man, there's an actual reason. During the same contest that produced Sonic, Naoto Oshima sketched a caricature of the US President Theodore Roosevelt in pajamas. Yes, pajamas. The design was almost considered to be the protagonist of the game. Imagine that. Eggman in pajamas as the main hero of the Sonic franchise. In the end, the design wasn't chosen as the hero, but the developers loved its rotund shape and big mustache, so they repurposed him into Sonic's archvillain. Eggman represents industry gone mad, with machinery covering the natural world as seen in the world map of the 8-bit version of Sonic 1, while Sonic embodies speed and nature. It's funny to think that the guy who spends his days building giant robots and trapping animals started as a caricature of a United States president. Oh, and if you grew up calling him Dr. Robotnik, that's because Sega's American American branch used that name for years before the Japanese Eggman became official worldwide with the launch of Sonic Adventure. Sega of America feared that the name Eggman would not be taken very seriously as a villain. You can see that the 90s descriptions of Robotnik in the comics and SatAM cartoon paint him as a much more sinister villain than the comical cartoonish bad guy from the games. So I honestly kinda get what they were going for. Sonic's enemies, called Badniks or Badnik robots, are machines that house trapped animals. When you destroy a motorbug or crab meat, you free a flicky or another little creature. The idea was to show the conflict between nature and technology. Dr. Eggman encases animals in metal to power his machines, while Sonic liberates them. And hey, if you think this was interesting, wait for our next videos that we have coming up. It's gonna be insane. But you gotta subscribe, otherwise YouTube may never show you our videos again. Anyway, when Sega brought Sonic 1 to the Game Gear and Master System in the very same year of 1991, they couldn't simply port the 16-bit game over. These 8-bit systems lacked the power. Instead, Ancient, the studio founded by Streets of Rage composer Yuzo Koshiro, built a companion game from scratch. Gone were the vertical loops and dizzying corkscrews. The pace is slower. Exploration and platforming are more emphasized. New zones like Bridge and Jungle replace some of the Genesis stages and come with their own gorgeous music. Even zones like Labyrinth and Scrap Brain have completely new songs unique to this version, which are all incredible since Yuzo Koshiro is a genius. Chaos Emeralds hide in the stages themselves, so finding them requires thoroughly exploring each act rather than leaping into a special stage. Even the iconic bonus stages, accessed with 50 rings, have a different casino-like feel. You might have thought this game was just a quick and dirty downgrade, but the development story is surprisingly ambitious. Ancient's Ayano Koshiro directed the project, while her brother Yuzo composed music. He reused only 3 tracks from the Mega Drive version and wrote an entirely new soundtrack with the Game Gear's limited sound channels. One of those pieces, Bridge Zone's theme, became so beloved, it later inspired Tails' theme in Sonic Adventure. If you're a music enthusiast, listen closely for the melodic similarities between Bridge Zone and Believe in Myself. Those subtle callbacks show how intertwined Sonic's history is, even across hardware boundaries, because Sonic can't reclaim dropped rings when hit, and boss levels provide no rings at all. The game has a distinct tension. Every hit counts. Casually playing this version feels like discovering a parallel world. The physics are familiar, but the level design nudges you to slow down, peek behind waterfalls, and climb for hidden platforms. People often forget that the 8-bit outing was many kids' first Sonic, since in Brazil and Europe, the Master System was more popular than any other 8-bit console. This specific game was the face of Sonic, and honestly, the face of gaming for years in these places. Continuing on with the fascinating stories behind the initial creations of Sonic characters, Sonic didn't run alone for long. For the sequel, Sega held another internal contest to design a sidekick. Artist Yasushi Yamaguchi created a two-tailed fox whose name, Miles Per Hour, is a pun on miles per hour. Sega of America wanted to call him Tails, but Yamaguchi insisted on his punny name, so they compromised. Miles Tails Per Hour. His twin tail let him fly like a helicopter, and the idea came from Japanese kitsune myths about foxes with multiple tails. He's also a mechanical genius, building planes and gadgets, which contrast with Sonic's speed. Tails actually didn't debut in the Sonic 2 game for the Genesis, the 8-bit version of Sonic 2 for the Game Gear and Master System, which came out a bit earlier than the Genesis version, was Tails' actual first appearance. Of course, the 16-bit version started development earlier. The 8-bit version just happened to be released first. In that game, Tails isn't accompanying you as a sidekick. He was actually captured by Dr. Eggman, and it's Sonic's goal to rescue him at the end of the game. Some fans theorize that Tails was supposed to be playable and follow Sonic in this game. In the title cards for the zones in Sonic 2 8-bit, there are artworks of Sonic along Tails exploring the level, which led fans to conclude the kidnapping plot point was a compromise due to technical limitations of the Game Gear not allowing two players on the same screen at once. Something really weird happens in the bad ending of the game. If you don't collect the Chaos Emeralds, a melancholic ending plays out where Sonic isn't able to rescue Tails, and he looks up at the end to see a vision of him in the clouds. This made young fans afraid that, in the timeline of the bad ending of this game, Tails actually died. The weirdest thing is that this is pretty believable. The game doesn't spell out what actually happened to Tails, so his destiny after not being able to save him is up in the air. A common misconception with Tails relates to the tornado plane we first see in the 16-bit version of Sonic 2. A lot of fans think that's Tails' plane, because when you play as Sonic, it's the Fox that pilots it for you, but the plane is actually owned by Sonic, and the Hedgehog used it to arrive on West Side Island in the first place. Although the plane wasn't from Tails, the young sidekick still showed his mechanical prowess from his very first debut. During the Wing Fortress level, there is actually a subtle, visual-only storyline relating to the tornado. When the level begins, the tornado is shot, and Sonic has to board the Wing Fortress alone as Tails loses altitude. In the end, Tails comes back with the tornado not only fixed, but with a new propulsor installed by him, which allows him and Sonic to reach the Death Egg. So whenever someone tells you that Tails was just a sidekick, and his mechanical genius side only started appearing on modern versions of the character, tell them they're wrong. Tails' prowess has been there since 1992. Tails later makes the Tornado 2 in Sonic Adventure. He constructs various gadgets in games and cartoons, often acting as the team's engineer. His tech skills contrast with Sonic's speed and Knuckles' strength. He's kind of the glue holding these two together. In the Sat AM cartoon, Tails is the youngest freedom fighter, but even there he shows inventiveness, helping the group with gadgets. It's impressive that a Kid Fox can build such great inventions. If you grew up reading gaming magazines, you may remember screenshots of a mysterious hidden palace zone that never appeared in Sonic 2. The level was cut late in development due to time constraints, but left partially in the cartridge. Hackers found fragments of its data, and prototypes showed purple water, giant gym halls, and dinosaur badniks. Decades later, the mobile remake of Sonic 2 by Christian Whitehead restored Hidden Palace as a secret stage. To access it, you had to fall into a part of Mystic Cave Zone that was previously a pit of spikes. Discovering it felt like unearthing a childhood myth. It's a testament to how fans can keep legends alive until developers finally make them real. Or in this case, a fan becomes a developer and does it himself. Try to find Mystic Cave Zone next time you play the mobile or Origins version of Sonic 2. Remember the first time you learned the spin dash? Also introduced in Sonic 2, it lets you crouch, rev up, and zoom forward from a standstill. Before that, Sonic had to run to build momentum. Sonic 1 on the original Genesis feels like a very different game nowadays due to the absence of the spin dash. Modern re-releases always add the spin dash back in, but in the original Sonic 1, building momentum always felt challenging and difficult. Sonic 2's approach is better, since the focus becomes not building the momentum, but keeping it. It's more fun this way. The move became so iconic that later games added variations like the Super Peel Out and Drop Dash. Let's also explain more deeply the Drop Dash. Introduced in Sonic Mania in 2017, the Drop Dash is best described as a mid-air spin dash. By holding the jump button in mid-air, Sonic charges the dash and blasts forward upon landing. It can be cancelled by releasing the button early, and it won't work if Sonic gets hit or has certain shields active, because then the powers of these shields replace the Drop Dash. When using the Drop Dash as Supersonic, it sets off a mini earthquake and allows for a bigger boost. The move was designed with new players in mind and has since been backported into re-releases of classic games. It's interesting to note that a similar move was planned for Sonic 3, as evidenced by its inclusion in a prototype of the game, but never used. What's even more interesting is that the Drop Dash wasn't based off this unused move. The Christian Whitehead team had the exact same idea that the Sonic 3 developers couldn't implement without even knowing it. Great minds think alike, isn't that what they say? Even Sonic Generations got the Drop Dash added to it through the 2024 remaster Sonic X Shadow Generations, which shows how the move became established in Sonic's arsenal forever. Being able to do a spin dash when jumping is just too cool. It's hard to imagine classic Sonic without these additions to his moveset now. let's talk about a Sonic spin-off that introduced obscure characters that went decades on without reappearing. Sega Sonic the Hedgehog was a 1993 arcade game running on Sega's System 32 hardware. Up to 3 players controlled Sonic, Mighty the Armadillo, or Ray the Flying Squirrel. Kinda funny how Ray isn't just Ray the Squirrel, like any other Sonic characters would be named. He's Ray the Flying Squirrel. Really important to emphasize the flying part. This was Mighty's debut, and while the Armadillo would come back on Chaotix, as we previously mentioned, Ray didn't appear again until the Sonic Mania Plus expansion decades later. There was even an Easter egg of missing posters for them in Sonic Generations City Escape, showing Sega was self-aware of their absence all this time. The cabinet for Sega Sonic used trackballs, and players had to outrun environmental hazards rather than enemies. Collecting rings restored health, and there was only one boss. Each character had color-coded controls: blue for Sonic, red for Mighty, and yellow for Ray. Players flicked the trackball to run and pressed the button to jump or perform a spin attack. This control scheme allowed up to 3 players to share the same screen, dashing away from hazards in a frantic pace. Interestingly, Sega Sonic is one of the first Sonic games with voiced characters, with Sonic, Mighty, and Ray speaking in Japanese. Because it never received a home port, it remained a rare curiosity until fans emulated it. It's worth checking out for its frantic pacing and to meet Ray, the Flying Squirrel, who took 24 years to return. Also in 1993, Sonic CD was released, and it is one of the weirdest 2D Sonic games. That's due to it being a completely different vision of what the franchise could be. What happened is that after Sonic 1, Sega of America started developing Sonic 2, and Sega of Japan started work on Sonic CD. So it's like Japan and America made different Sonic sequels. CD was directed by Naoto Oshima, the creator of the Sonic character. You can feel his authorial style throughout the game. The game introduced time travel. Each zone has 4 versions: past, present, bad future, and good future, and your actions determine which future you see. Destroy a robot generator in the past, and you'll create a utopian good future. Miss it, and you'll see a polluted landscape. The developers were inspired by Back to the Future, which explains the trippy mechanics. Sonic CD also introduced Amy Rose and the villainous Metal Sonic. Even the music changed between versions. The Japanese soundtrack is bouncy and upbeat, while the American version, composed by Spencer Nilsson, is orchestral and atmospheric. Which is better between these 2 versions is a fan debate that probably will never end. It all adds to the game's dreamy vibe. We mentioned the Super Peel-Out earlier, so let's dive deeper into it. First appearing in Sonic CD, and amusingly being alternatively named Strike Dash in Sonic Triple Trouble, the Super Peel-Out lets Sonic zoom off from a standstill by holding up and jump while charging. Sonic's feet form a figure 8 blur, which is super cool and super anime. The Sonic CD animations portray it very nicely. It's a bit faster than the spin dash, but leaves Sonic vulnerable to enemies, so there's kind of a trade-off there. In the 8-bit games, Sonic becomes briefly invincible after performing the move. This probably was an adjustment considering the smaller screen of the Game Gear. Sonic Mania lets you unlock the Super Peel-Out via the Secrets menu, but it unfortunately replaces the drop dash when you choose it. The Super Peel-Out is a flashy move that shows Sonic's love of speed, and perhaps his love of showing it off. In 1993, 2 very different Sonic cartoons premiered. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog leaned into slapstick humor and Looney Tunes style antics. Each episode featured Sonic and Tails outsmarting Dr. Robotnik and his bumbling robots Scratch, Grounder, and Coconuts. The show was episodic with little continuity. This comedic-centric tone contrasted sharply with the darker Saturday morning show airing at the same time. AOSTH introduced a lot of memes, including the iconic Pingas,
snooping as usual,
from early internet fandom. Also, Jaleel White was the voice of Sonic. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog may be goofy, but it cemented Sonic's personality for a generation of kids. Running concurrently with AOSTH, the Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning cartoon, often called Sat AM, told a darker, serialized story. Sonic teamed up with Princess Sally, Rotor, Bunny Rabbit, and other freedom fighters to resist a totalitarian Robotnik who had roboticized most of Mobius, which is what Sonic's world was called in the early American canon. The show introduced original characters and lore not found in the games, including the Great Forest and the Knothole Village. Sonic's favorite food, the chili dog, wasn't mentioned in the games, but became canonical thanks to the cartoons. In Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and Sat AM, Sonic is obsessed with chili dogs, often stopping mid-adventure to scarf one down. The food became a running gag. It highlights Sonic's laid-back personality and American influences. Unlike the slapstick AOSTH, Sat AM dealt with themes of resistance, sacrifice, and hope. The series only lasted 2 seasons, but its tone influenced the long-running Archie comics, and even cameoed in Sonic Spinball. It's interesting how the unique features of Sonic's early American canon lived on for an extremely long time through the Archie comics, to the point that elements like Princess Sally and the Freedom Fighters became much more associated with the comics than the 2-season show they originated from. The Archie comics were weird, but also way too cool. They ran from 1993 to 2017. The series built its own lore, including many different multi-issue arcs. They also experimented with crossovers, including one with Mega Man. If you like long soap opera storytelling in your Hedgehog franchise, the Archie comics are very much worth diving into. It felt crazy reading them and their convoluted plots as a kid. It was a very unique experience. You just had to be there during the endgame arc, where Sonic literally kills Robotnik, which is then replaced by an alternate reality version of himself who has the appearance of the modern Eggman we all know. Yeah. This kind of insane stuff happened all the time in these comics. Fans still campaign for the continuation of Sat AM, and actually they're making their own fan-made one, which is incredible. Sat AM proved that Sonic could anchor a serious narrative, which was very important for the brand back in the beginning of the franchise. The vast array of weird Sonic 90s media continues on. The British comic, Sonic the Comic, reimagined Super Sonic as a terrifying, uncontrollable alter ego rather than simply a powered-up Sonic. In this version, triggered by stress or exposure to Chaos Emeralds, Super Sonic becomes a separate entity bent on destruction. At one point, he loses his powers after an electromagnetic pulse and exists independently from Sonic. This interpretation influenced readers' perception of Super Sonic as both hero and monster. It's a reminder from the time of the early 90s Wild West Sonic lore, where the definition of canon was comically fragile. If you think Super Sonic is always a golden savior, then Fleetway Supersonic might be a surprising oddity. Sonic Chaos, also known as Sonic and Tails in Japan, was a 1993 Game Gear and Master System game, and the first 8-bit title to allow players to control Tails. It was also the first time any game let you control Tails' flight, which is weird to say, considering we're all used to the modern versions of Sonic 2, but that wasn't a thing in the original Genesis version, which probably just shows how rushed that game's development was. The game introduced the Spin Dash and the Super Peel-Out to 8-bit hardware, and added items like rocket shoes, which granted incredible speed and limited flight, and pogo springs that strapped springs to your shoes. These unique power-ups were one of the highlights of this often forgotten 8-bit spin-off. The difficulty was also thankfully toned down compared to the 8-bit Sonic 2, making it a much more accessible game. It's a charming portable adventure that's worth checking out for its own unique, forgotten features. When Sonic 3 wasn't ready for the 1993 holiday season, Sega Technical Institute produced Sonic Spinball in just 9 months. Market research showed players loved the Casino Night Zone from Sonic 2, so the developers built a game where Sonic himself acts as the pinball, using C programming instead of assembly to speed development. They created 4 large pinball zones filled with bumpers, flippers, and boss fights. In the story, Robotnik has built a fortress atop a volcano, and Sonic must infiltrate it to rescue animals and grab Chaos Emeralds. Since the game was made by a fully American team, it actually has references to characters from the Saturday morning cartoon or Archie Comics continuity. The result feels like an arcade game mixed with platforming. It may not control like a mainline Sonic, but it's a fascinating slice of 90s experimentation. Did you know Dr. Robotnik starred in his own puzzle game? Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, also from 1993, is essentially a westernized version of the Japanese puzzle game Puyo Puyo. Sega feared Puyo Puyo's characters wouldn't resonate outside Japan, so they gave the game a Dr. Robotnik skin, even adding characters from the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. It's interesting how Sonic Spinball references characters from Sonic Sat AM, and Dr. Robotnik Mean Bean Machine references Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. It's these kinds of things that show how the canon was really all over the place back then, but it was honestly kind of cool in a way. The plot has Robotnik kidnapping Beanville residents and turning them into robots. It's essentially Puyo Puyo, but Sonic. It gave Western players their first taste of the series, and decades later, everything came full circle with the chemical plant boss fight in Sonic Mania being exactly a Puyo Puyo minigame where you fight Robotnik. I cannot understate how much these two instances of Puyo Puyo being referenced might have made Sonic fans into Puyo Puyo tryhards. Sega's 16-bit console war with Nintendo led to one of gaming's most infamous marketing ploys, blast processing. In North America, Sega's marketing team coined this term to suggest that the Genesis had superior processing power compared to the Super Nintendo. The term referred to an obscure graphics programming method that Sega never actually used, but the commercials implied it made games like Sonic faster. The campaign worked. A Sony focus group found that teenage boys were actually embarrassed to admit they owned a Super Nintendo rather than a Genesis. While blast processing was a bit of a marketing fluff, the Genesis did have a faster CPU, which allowed Sonic games to run at very smooth speeds. It's a reminder that clever advertising can shape perceptions even when the tech jargon is mostly meaningless. Sega actually referenced the nostalgic blast processing commercial during the marketing campaign for the recent Sonic Racing Crossworlds. They remade the comparison between the Super Nintendo and Genesis, now to be a comparison between Mario Kart World and Sonic Crossworlds. It was a bold move that showed how confident they were with the game, even decades later. And with console wars over, Sega's confidence and attitude lives on, and that's what makes so many fans admire them despite the times they missed the mark. Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles were originally one game, but cartridge limitations and a McDonald's promotion deadline forced Sega to split them in two. Sonic 3 became a weirdly smaller release compared to Sonic 2, with only 6 zones. And then Sonic & Knuckles presented the rest of the game. But developers felt it damaged the original intention of the huge Sonic 3 experience they initially envisioned. To fix this, Sonic & Knuckles introduced lock-on technology. You could open the top of the cartridge and plug in Sonic 3 to create the full Sonic 3 and Knuckles experience. This allowed Knuckles to play through Sonic 3 zones and Tails to tackle the Sonic and Knuckles stages. It also made the Emeralds become Super Emeralds in the second half of the game, which made the existence of the elusive Hypersonic possible. In Sonic 3 and Knuckles, collecting all 7 Super Emeralds unlocked Hypersonic, Hyper Knuckles, and Super Tails. Hypersonic flashes rainbow colors and has a double jump that triggers a screen-clearing flash. Hyper Knuckles shakes the ground when he glides into walls. Super Tails summons Flicky Birds to attack enemies and is honestly super OP. Super Tails is definitely underrated, man. These transformations push the childhood power fantasy of collecting the emeralds to new heights, making the quest for them more rewarding. Locking on Sonic 2 also lets you play as Knuckles in that game, complete with his gliding and wall climbing. Plugging in the original Sonic 1 unlocks the Blue Spheres game with thousands of procedurally generated special stages. That's right, I honestly don't think anyone has ever beaten every possible Blue Sphere stage available here. Sonic & Knuckles felt like buying one cartridge and getting a library of games for it. It was revolutionary at the time, but nowadays, we almost kinda see it as DLC. If modern downloadable content annoys you, remember that Sega was delivering extra content through physical connectors decades ago. For years, fans speculated that pop star Michael Jackson composed music for Sonic 3. Rumors persisted because several tracks sounded like his style. In 2013, composer Brad Buxer confirmed that Jackson worked on the soundtrack, but supposedly requested his name be removed because he was unhappy with Genesis audio quality. Another producer claimed Sega cut ties due to Jackson's 1993 scandal, but Buxer insisted the decision came from Jackson himself. One of the Sonic 3 tracks later evolved into the song Stranger in Moscow. For the longest time, these connections felt like just a legend, but when the Sonic Origins compilation was released, fans noticed that many Sonic 3 tracks were replaced by melodies from the prototype version of the game. They were exactly the tracks theorized to have been composed by Michael Jackson. So, this basically confirms that these tracks, like Ice Cap and Launch Base, really were made by the pop star himself, since there is no other explanation for there being copyright issues with them. The King of Pop really did work on Sonic's music, even if he went uncredited. Some fans believe that the entire soundtrack was initially composed by Jackson, but at the time of release, many of the tracks were replaced, with the ones remaining being few exceptions. This makes me imagine how the Michael Jackson version of, for example, Angel Island sounded like. Just know that when Carnival Night Zone gets stuck in your head, you might be humming a piece of pop music history. During Sonic 3's development, Sega wanted a new character to rival Sonic. They auditioned multiple designs before settling on a red echidna named Knuckles. The character's dreadlock-like quills were influenced by Jamaican culture, while his abilities were based on the idea of breaking walls. He can glide, climb, and punch through obstacles. Knuckles is more than one of Sonic's first rivals. Knuckles is the last guardian of the Master Emerald on Angel Island, making introverted and fiercely protective. This mystical gem keeps the island afloat. This gigantic gem balances the energies of the 7 Chaos Emeralds. When Robotnik steals it in Sonic 3, the island crashes into the sea, setting off the game's adventure. Knuckles is the last survivor of the last known Echidna tribe and takes his duty seriously, which is why he initially battles Sonic, believing the Hedgehog was the one who stole the Master Emerald. He's strong but gullible, which made him be tricked by Dr. Eggman. In gameplay, he introduced new ways of traversal. Gliding across gaps and climbing vertical surfaces changed how players approached levels. When playing as Knuckles, the game has an alternative story that takes place after the main Sonic playthrough. We see Angel Island is floating again, and Knuckles fights the Egg Robo, not Eggman. In the end, we see Mecha Sonic transform into a super form, something exclusive to playing as Knuckles. It makes the character feel special, as he has his own story inside the same game. Do you remember what Sonic's first kart game was like? Before Crossworlds and its insane transformations and crossover characters, Sonic Drift put the Hedgehog behind the wheel in an outrun-style racer on the Game Gear. The game plays like Sega's own road trip classic, with curved tracks, split paths, and a surprisingly robust power-up system. There are 6 Chaos GP circuits, each with 3 courses inspired by Green Hill, Marble, and even Labyrinth. You can activate character-specific abilities. Sonic gets a speed boost, Tails can drive over obstacles, Amy throws hearts to slow rivals, and Robotnik drops mines. It's also the first ever Sonic game where you can play as Amy or Eggman, much before Adventure or Adventure 2. Sonic Drift's development reveals an interesting cross-cultural story. Released only in Japan, the game never left its home territory until compilations like Sonic Mega Collection Plus, meaning many Western fans never experienced it until decades later. The digital manual included in the collection remains in Japanese, adding to the feeling of digging up an imported oddity. The vehicles themselves are small, colorful convertibles with names referencing wind currents, like Sonic Cyclone or Robotnik's Egg Typhoon. When you play Sonic Drift now, the handling feels twitchy and the courses are short, but there's charm in the way the game distills Sonic speed into kart form while dealing with 8-bit limitations. For a 1994 portable racer, it captures that arcade feel, and while it may not be as refined as later Sonic racers, it paved the road for the crossover kart games we have today. The sequel, Sonic Drift 2, now released worldwide, improves almost everything. Unlike the first game, items are no longer used immediately when collected. You can store them and unleash them strategically, adding a layer of tactics. The AI opponents are tougher too, using their abilities smartly. The character roster expands with Knuckles, Fang the Sniper, and Metal Sonic. Each has a unique car and special move. Fang throws exploding bullets, Metal Sonic has an overdrive burst, and Knuckles glides over rough terrain. You must win all Chaos Emeralds on the blue GP. Beat that, and you get a special final race against Eggman if you're playing as Sonic, or Sonic if playing as Eggman. These little scenarios make the game feel more like a mini adventure than a simple racer. Sonic Drift 2's presentation is also snappier, with catchier music. The track themes often echo classic levels. It's very weird to listen to Emerald Hill in 8-bit form, but here we are. And because the game was released in the West, fans outside Japan finally got to see what portable Sonic racing was like without needing an import. It's still tough, the turning radius is tiny and hazards pop up quickly, but it's a much better and more complete game than Sonic Drift 1. Playing it today is like glimpsing the roots of Sonic R and the All-Stars racing series. Before Mario Paint, there was Tails and the Music Maker on the Sega Pico, a musical playground starring Sonic's two-tailed sidekick. Released in 1994 for the launch of the educational electronic toy Sega Pico in North America, the game was designed to teach music theory, rhythm, scales, and instruments through interactive play. Kids can freely compose songs, draw art, and play along with Tails. It's charming that the first Sonic game to revolve around music doesn't even star Sonic. Each page of the Pico book offers a different activity. On page 2, you run through Green Hill Zone with no badniks or loops, just gentle slopes and hidden notes. The Traveler with Tails minigame replicates Green Hill across 3 small stages and includes a musical chairs minigame where you sit frogs down as the music stops. Pressing different buttons changes the tempo. Another page has a percussion pinball table where you drop notes and bounce them off drums. And there's a catch the note game where you trace circles around falling notes with the stylus. Compared to other educational games, Music Maker feels playful rather than didactic. There's no overt scoring. You're simply encouraged to experiment with rhythm and melody. Because it's Tails guiding you, the game frames learning as tinkering with gadgets. If you were a kid in the 90s playing this on your Pico, you might have discovered a love of music or composition. And though the game's visuals and audio are rudimentary today, the idea of an interactive music studio for kids predates many modern apps. Sonic Triple Trouble continued the portable adventures with a larger scope and more characters. This is where a new rival, Fang the Hunter, was introduced, one of Sonic's earliest adversaries. He was originally called Fang the Sniper in Sonic Triple Trouble. He was also called Knack the Weasel sometimes, but that was just an alternate localization name. A lot of fans debated over what kind of species Fang actually was, since the weasel was just a localized name. Turns out he's actually half jerboa, half wolf. Fang is a treasure hunter who wears a cowboy hat and wields a cork gun, bouncing on his springy tail. He lives in subspace, rides a hoverbike, and loves treasure. Despite being a minor villain in the 90s, he reappeared in Sonic Superstars in 2023, marking his first playable appearance in decades. It's kind of amusing that when Fang came back on Superstars, he was renamed yet again, with Hunter taking the place of the Sniper adjective. Pretty funny to imagine that Sniper was suddenly considered too violent of a nickname for a children's game. Fang was a mini-boss at the end of each special stage, making collecting Chaos Emeralds feel like a cat-and-mouse game. Triple Trouble's narrative and level design showed the full potential of what a Sonic game could be on a handheld at the time. This game has since been remade by a fan named Noah as Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit, bringing out the full appeal of its ideas and themes. The fan game is presented as if Sonic Triple Trouble was releasing on the Genesis as a direct sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It's seriously worth checking out for the great gameplay and insane music arrangements. Knuckles also appeared in Triple Trouble, becoming a recurring character in the franchise. His popularity would soon even lead him to his own game. Knuckles Chaotix, a 1995 title for the ill-fated 32X, experimented with a unique partner system. Each stage tethered 2 characters together with a rubber band-like ring. Players had to manipulate this tether to launch themselves forward, swing across gaps, or pull each other up. The mechanic began as a prototype called Sonic Crackers, starring Sonic and Tails, but shifted to Knuckles when Sonic Team moved to other projects. The final game introduced the Chaotix crew: Mighty the Armadillo, Espio the Chameleon, Vector the Crocodile, Charmy Bee, Heavy, and Bomb. In Knuckles Chaotix, Metal Sonic is the final boss, and he undergoes his most terrifying transformation. He absorbs the Dark Ring to become Metal Sonic Kai, a massive, monstrous, and red version of himself, with terrifying power. That ending of the game even shows him hovering over a destroyed city, implying that your failure let him cause mass death and destruction. It's so disturbing that any kid could easily have a nightmare about it. On the other hand, collecting all Chaos Rings unlocks a good ending, featuring Sonic and Tails appearing on the final screen. Oh, alright. All that effort beating Metal Sonic Kai, and only then Sonic and Tails show up. In the original Japanese version, Knuckles Chaotix is just called Chaotix. It makes sense, as the Chaotix weren't really Knuckles' team or something. In Sonic Heroes, which came out many years later, the Chaotix became led by Vector, and Knuckles didn't have any relation to them anymore. It's almost as if this game got lost in canon. Even still, Chaotix remains a quirky gem worth exploring, especially for its music. Did you know Sonic starred in an educational game that used a stylus years before the DS? Sonic the Hedgehog Game World for the Sega Pico is a carnival of minigames. Aspect developed it for the child-oriented Pico, releasing in Japan in 1994 and in the US in 1996. In the story, Dr. Eggman builds a massive carnival tower called Game World. Sonic, Tails, and Amy must explore its pages to retrieve the scattered Chaos Emeralds. Gameplay is built around the Pico's magic pen. Each page is like a board game where you drag a cursor to select minigames. Players can choose Sonic, Tails, or Amy and set a difficulty level. Friendly messages from characters guide you, and once you've beaten the last page, you can even create a personal art gallery. Unlike many educational games, Game World still feels like a Sonic adventure. One page has you running through platforming stages, another asks you to guide rings into slots. There are even hidden casino-style minigames in the Japanese version. The music remixes the Sonic 3 title theme and fun trivia. This is the first US Sonic game to call the villain both Robotnik and Eggman simultaneously. What's fascinating is the regional differences. The North American release removing the third page entirely, cutting out fantasy violence and gambling elements. A new drawing page was added in its place. Even the vocabulary used by Sonic and his friends was simplified. While this game is largely forgotten today, it pioneered the idea of mixing minigames with a hub world long before Sonic Jam or Sonic World did it on the Saturn. Plus, drawing pictures with Sonic on a stylus in the 90s felt surprisingly modern. Sonic's sidekick isn't always stuck in his shadow. Tails' Sky Patrol, a 1995 Game Gear title, lets you take to the skies to stop a mysterious witch. Tails flies over rails in a horizontally scrolling world, trying to stop Witchcart, who wants to petrify anyone who resists her rule. The game was originally released only in Japan on April 28, 1995. It later reappeared as an unlockable in Sonic Adventure DX and Sonic Gems Collection. Gameplay is tough. Tails is always flying forward, and your job is to steer, dodge obstacles, and throw a boomerang-style ring at enemies or objects. Touching the ground or a wall instantly costs a life. A flight meter slowly drains. You must grab mint candies to refill it. Bosses like Caratia and Behringer hurl projectiles while you juggle momentum and ring trajectory. With no continues, this game quickly earned a reputation for difficulty. The game's development history is even more interesting. It began life as a Disney-related prototype for an unannounced monochrome handheld. After the project was cancelled, developers at JSH repurposed the prototype for Sega, swapping the Disney character for Tails and redesigning the world to suit the Game Gear's color screen. Early footage even shows Tails fighting Pete from Disney. This explains the oddball villains and the lack of Sonic connections. It's just like how Doki Doki Panic was reskinned into Super Mario Bros. 2. Playing Tails Sky Patrol today feels like a bizarre fever dream. Its inclusion in compilations gives modern players a chance to appreciate its quirky charm and punishing difficulty. If you prefer your Sonic spin-offs slower and more thoughtful, Tails Adventure is a gem. Released for the Game Gear in 1995, this game features Tails exploring Coco Island to thwart the Battle Cuckoo Empire. It's slower paced and focused on exploration rather than speed. Tails' mission is to find the Chaos Emeralds hidden on the island and use them to defeat the Great Battle Cuckoo and his army. Gameplay resembles a Metroidvania. You wander through 2D side-scrolling stages, collecting gadgets like bombs, a hammer, or a remote robot. Each item opens new paths in previous areas, encouraging backtracking. Tails can fly using his Heli-Tails ability, but a flight gauge limits how long you can stay airborne. Collecting Chaos Emeralds extends both the flight gauge and your life meter. Up to 4 items can be equipped at once, and switching items is done via a pause menu, adding a layer of resource management. Unlike the adrenaline rush of mainline Sonic games, Tails Adventure invites you to take your time. The story culminates in a battle against the Great Battle Cuckoo in his fortress. After the credits roll, a gag cutscene shows Tails' remote robot malfunctioning, a lighthearted way to wrap things up. While not a huge commercial hit, the game's exploratory design earned it cult status. Modern re-releases in Sonic Adventure DX, Sonic Gems Collection, and Sonic Origins Plus have introduced new generations to its deliberate journey. In 1995, Sega experimented with a slower, puzzle-oriented Sonic game, Sonic Labyrinth, for the Game Gear. Some consider it to actually be the worst Sonic game of all time, but is that fair? Dr. Eggman tricks Sonic into wearing slowdown boots, sapping his speed. The only way to remove them is to navigate Eggman's trap-filled Super Labyrinth and recover the Chaos Emeralds. Sonic must collect 3 keys in each isometric level to open the exit, and he uses the spin dash as his primary movement, ricocheting off walls and obstacles. The game is divided into 4 zones, with 3 main acts and a 4th boss stage. Getting hit by enemies knocks the keys out of Sonic, forcing you to retrieve them before time runs out. The spin dash is both a blessing and a curse. It's the only way to move quickly, but it's also hard to control in tight corridors. Losing all lives sends you back to the beginning, which frustrated many players. Early reviewers appreciated the unique concept, but later retrospectives criticized the sluggish pace and cumbersome controls. It just seems very counterintuitive to make a Sonic the Hedgehog game, with the twist being that he's super slow, in my opinion. I tried to play it a bit, and it's really hard to get used to. But despite its flaws, Sonic Labyrinth does have a certain charm. The isometric perspective and puzzle focus were kind of advanced for a Game Gear game, actually. The story explanation for Sonic's slow speed is amusing, and beating Eggman to remove the slowdown boots feels satisfying, if you even get to that point. In a franchise defined by speed, a game that forces you to be methodical stands out. If you're really extremely patient, you might find Sonic Labyrinth weirdly rewarding, even if I have my doubts. What happens when Sonic enters a 3D fighting game? Sega AM2's arcade title, Sonic the Fighters, answers that question. Designer Masashiro Sugiyama originally added Sonic and Tails as Easter eggs in the fighting game Fighting Vipers, which inspired Yu Suzuki to pitch a dedicated Sonic fighter. Yuji Naka was initially concerned about depicting Sonic characters brawling, but ultimately approved, making this Sonic's first playable appearance in full 3D, which is insane to think about. The game ran on the Model 2 arcade board and was released in Japanese arcades in 1996. The premise is simple. Robotnik is building the Death Egg 2, and the only way to reach it is by using Chaos Emeralds as fuel. It's determined there will be a tournament to determine who will take the 7 emeralds to space. Fighters include Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, weirdly named Rosie in the arcade manual, Bark the Polar Bear, Espio the Chameleon, Fang the Sniper, and Bean the Dynamite. The rock-paper-scissors mechanics, block, attack, throw, feel like a simplified Virtua Fighter. Sonic the Fighters never received a proper Saturn release, but it resurfaced in Sonic Gems Collection and later digital ports. Playing it today is like stepping into a time capsule of mid-90s 3D graphics. The soundtrack is fire though, especially Metal Sonic's theme is a banger that transcends few other tracks in the series. I'm serious. Released in 1996, Sonic 3D Blast, also known as Sonic 3D, Flicky's Island, moved Sonic into an isometric 2.5D world. Developed by Traveler's Tales while Sonic Team worked on Nights into Dreams, it used pre-rendered 3D models to create pseudo-3D visuals, like in Donkey Kong Country. The game's objective is to rescue Flickies, little birds enslaved by Dr. Robotnik, and guide them to a warp ring. Each zone is split into sections. In Sonic 3D Blast, the Flickies originate from another dimension, and Robotnik enslaves them to search for Chaos Emeralds. You must collect 5 Flickies to move on. The Flickies come in different colors with different behaviors. Some follow Sonic closely, while others wander off. This mechanic emphasizes Sonic's theme of rescuing nature from industrial oppression. It's also adorable to see tiny birds flutter around Sonic's head. Development for this game lasted only 8 months, and since the planned Saturn game Sonic X-treme was cancelled, Sega commissioned a Saturn port of 3D Blast. The Saturn port actually has an entirely different soundtrack, creating another debate between fans similar to the one about Sonic CD's American versus Japanese soundtrack. The Genesis 3D Blast soundtrack was helmed by Jun Sinue, and many of its songs were repurposed for Sonic Adventure, which makes it a fascinating and honestly kind of important listen for the discography of the series. The Saturn soundtrack has an atmospheric touch and insane high quality that is just magical. It's definitely worth a listen to. Well, we've talked about Sonic 3D Blast, but what about Sonic Blast? That's right, no 3D, just Blast. In late 1996, Sega released one last hurrah for the Game Gear, Sonic Blast, also known as G-Sonic in Japan. Kind of weird Japanese name, but alright. Developed by Aspect, this platformer uses pre-rendered sprites reminiscent of Donkey Kong Country. Yeah, that's right. These mad lads were actually trying to implement 3D rendered graphics in an 8-bit console, and they kinda succeeded, even if the end result is pretty ugly. The game lets you play as either Sonic or Knuckles. Sonic has a double jump, while Knuckles can glide and climb walls, giving each character different routes through the stages. Dr. Eggman has shattered a Chaos Emerald and constructed the Silver Castle. Your goal is to collect the 5 emerald fragments and bring down his fortress. Critics at the time were impressed by the graphics, but noted that the gameplay felt sluggish and imprecise. The Game Gear's small screen exacerbates this, making hazards hard to see. There are 5 zones with 3 acts each. The third act is always a boss fight. Levels like the underwater sea coal ruins and the ancient Yellow Desert evoke the look of 16-bit Sonic games, but with fewer enemies and simpler layouts. Because this was the final Sonic game for the Game Gear, it feels like a send-off, complete with a pretty frustrating special stage reminiscent of the half-pipe from Sonic 2. It's definitely the weakest of the 8-bit platforming Sonic games, but Sonic Blast's experience is still very amusing. An interesting footnote: Brazilian manufacturer Tectoy ported Sonic Blast to the Master System exclusively for Brazil. That version plays identically, but runs at a higher resolution and has now become a collector's item. When you play Sonic Blast today, the pre-rendered visuals can appear dated, but there's a charm in seeing Sonic rendered in pseudo-3D on an 8-bit handheld. It's also the only Game Gear platforming title where you can play as Knuckles, making it a unique piece of Sonic history. In 1996, a 2-part Japanese original video animation, or OVA, featured Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles facing the threat of Metal Sonic. Dr. Eggman tricks Sonic to copy his data, creating a robot doppelganger. The OVA famously gave Knuckles a cowboy hat, which became a deep-cut reference in the franchise. The OVA was later released as Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie for Western audiences. That's right, way before Paramount came around with their trilogy, Sonic already had a movie for years. It remains notable for its anime style, and for establishing an insanely interesting character arc for Metal Sonic, making him a kind of, ironically for a robot, human and sympathetic character. Imagine Doom, but instead of killing demons, you're solving math problems with Sonic. That sums up Sonic Schoolhouse, a 1996 educational PC game developed by BAP Interactive and Orion Interactive. It's an interactive classroom where Sonic teaches math, reading, and spelling for kids in kindergarten through 4th grade. Sega CEO Shinobu Toyota hilariously called it Doom for Kids because of its first-person perspective. You don't play as Sonic, you play as one of 10 generic animal students, which all look pretty weird. This entire game is basically the weirdest Sonic thing ever, due to its very early 3D graphics. Sonic appears as a teacher guiding you through hallways lined with classrooms. Inside, you pick up balloons or letters corresponding to the correct answer to a problem. Answer correctly, and you get to play minigames like 3D Concentration, a ring collecting game, or go on field trips where you watch educational videos about animals. Robotnik and Badniks occasionally pop in to steal answers or knock rings out of your hands, adding a light sense of danger. At the end of a session, you can print a certificate showing how many gumballs you earned. The game was meant to kick off a series of Sonic educational titles, but no sequels were made. While the graphics and gameplay are really simplistic, there's a surreal charm in walking through brightly colored hallways, with Sonic encouraging you to practice multiplication. It's also a snapshot of Sega's experimental mid-90s phase, when they licensed Sonic to various developers for unusual projects. 90s PC gamers got their first taste of Sonic classics with the Sonic & Knuckles collection. This compilation was released in Japan on February 14, 1997, and in March in North America and Europe. It includes Sonic 3, Sonic & Knuckles, and the combined Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the lock-on combination originally possible by physically connecting cartridges. Expert Software handled the North American publishing. For many PC players without a Genesis console, this was the first chance to experience these classics. The collection runs using a Windows 95 interface and features a distinctive MIDI soundtrack. It's actually unknown why this PC version has its own unique music. Some fans speculate that it's because the original game used the Sega Genesis Yamaha sound chip, while others believe that it's due to legal problems involving the uncredited compositions by Michael Jackson and other musicians. Some fans call this the Sonic 3 MIDI soundtrack, and it has its own nostalgic cult following, but most find it inferior to the Genesis original. The collection also lacks the competition mode from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and doesn't include the two-player head-to-head modes. Installing the game now is tricky on modern systems. It was designed for Windows 95 and 98 and uses a 256 color display. Despite these quirks, the collection marks an important step in preserving Sonic history on PCs. Alright, here is where things get truly obscure. Let's talk about Sonic Extreme, the wild first 3D Sonic game that never was. In the mid-90s, Sega Technical Institute was tasked with making Sonic's answer to Mario 64, and they went for broke with a fisheye reflex lens that made levels twist like tubes, so Sonic could spin dash up walls and ceilings. Of course, needless to say that it would have been very unpleasant to play. You would be able to play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or the bizarre scrapped character Tiara Bubowski, each with their own camera angles. Yeah, Tiara Bubowski, also known as Tiara Cyberewski or Princess Tiara, was actually going to be a thing. She is a Manx cat created by Chris Sin, the lead designer for Sonic Extreme. She was dropped when development difficulties forced the team to focus only on Sonic. Tiara was intended to be a love interest for Sonic in order to add romantic tension to the story, and she was actually initially planned to be a Bandicoot. Tiara would have a two-dimensional gameplay style, with the additional capacity to travel forward and backward to other 2D planes. Sonic's playstyle would use the dizzying fisheye. Tails had a first-person flight mode, and there were all sorts of new moves like spin slash, ring throwing, a ring-powered shield, and even a sonic boom. Sonic Extreme was originally conceived as a Sonic & Knuckles sequel on the Genesis, popped to the 32X with the name Sonic Mars, and then went to the Saturn. Yuji Naka famously told designer Chris Sin good luck after seeing an early demo of the game. Politics between Sega of America and Sega of Japan meant two separate engines were developed. Sin's team built 4 zones with the fisheye camera, while Chris Coffin's team focused on boss battles with big 3D arenas. Just when progress seemed steady, Sega nabbed the Knights engine, only for Naka to threaten to quit unless they stopped using his tech. CEO Hayao Nakayama then ordered the whole game to be remade around Coffin's engine, forcing the devs to restart and crunch 20-hour days. Chris Sin's devotion to completing Sonic X-treme in a timely manner caused such a strain on his physical health that he contracted a strong case of pneumonia during development, and was told that, should he continue pushing himself like this any longer, he would only have about 6 more months until his body failed entirely. Faced with this, Sin permanently departed from the project, leaving Sonic X-treme without its lead developer. Sin would go on to be the most crucial in the preservation of development images, documents, and data around Sonic X-treme, becoming the primary source of information around the game. Sega quietly axed X-treme and rushed out a port of Sonic 3D Blast instead, while Nights into Dreams stole the spotlight. The tragedy of Sonic X-treme is heartbreaking, especially knowing the game was very unlikely to be any good, since the Saturn hardware limitations didn't allow them to make a game that actually took advantage of Sonic's speed. Because of this and its development hell, Sonic X-treme would have likely become a truly rough transition for Sonic into 3D, unlike Adventure, which was an excellent game. Craziest thing is that Chris Sin would go on to be a lead-level implementer of Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric decades later, which is another very controversial game, although at least it got to be finished. If Sonic X-treme was released, Sonic's history would become completely different, whether for better or worse. Some fans even say that Sonic's Lost World was inspired by it, not by Mario Galaxy. Honestly, in my opinion, it would be very funny if we suddenly discovered that Mario Galaxy is the one that was inspired by Sonic X-treme. Released later in 1997, Sonic R took the blue blur onto a 3D racetrack. Developed by Traveler's Tales in collaboration with Sonic Team, it's the third racing game in the series, but the first to feature fully 3D environments. Players race as one of 10 available characters across surrealistic courses like Resort Island, Radical City, and Reactive Factory. Unlike kart racers, Sonic R characters mostly run on foot. Courses have multiple routes, shortcuts, and platforming sections, so exploring the track is as important as speed. Rings collected on the track can be spent at gates to open new paths. Weather effects enhance the atmosphere, and the soundtrack, composed by Richard Jakes, with vocals by TJ Davis, is still beloved for its cheesy yet catchy tunes. Critically, the game received mixed reviews at launch. Some praised the graphics and exploratory course design, while others criticized its short length and slippery controls. The PC version released the following year, and there was also a Sonic Gems collection port. Even if you don't love the handling, there's something relaxing about running around listening to these dreamy songs. It almost feels like a 3D platformer disguised as a racer. By 1997, Sega wanted to reintroduce Sonic to new audiences while experimenting with 3D. Sonic Jam on the Sega Saturn is a compilation of the main Genesis games, but it does more than just emulate them. The ports include bug fixes and improvements, like the ability to spin dash in Sonic 1, separate special stages, and time attack. You can also choose between original, normal, and easy difficulty modes. Normal rearranges level layouts, while easy adds platforms and removes hazards. Lock-on is featured, so you can play Sonic 3 and Knuckles or Knuckles in Sonic 2. But the real star is the 3D hub called Sonic World. Here you control Sonic in a small open environment, exploring an art gallery, a music room, a video theater, and an extensive museum of Sonic history. Missions like collecting rings or stepping on switches unlock secret areas and the staff credits. Sonic World was built using a modified version of the Nights into Dreams engine, making it a testbed for Sonic's future 3D ventures. Yuji Naka described the project as a way for Sonic Team to refresh themselves after not developing a Sonic game since 1994. Playing Sonic Jam today feels like visiting a museum. The Saturn versions of the games run smoothly, and the extras, such as Japanese commercials and concept art, offer a fascinating look at Sonic's evolution. It's interesting to see a homage to Sonic's past from a time when Sonic still only had his classic version. It feels like a capstone to the classic Sonic era, as the developers prepared to take a leap into the future. Sonic World is small but full of secrets, and it foreshadows the 3D platforming of Sonic Adventure. Few fans know that the deeper motivation for the Sonic Jam release was to make Sonic more popular in Japan. The Saturn was a sales success in Japan, but the Mega Drive wasn't, which means Japanese audiences didn't have much opportunity to play the classic games. Thus, the opportunity for a compilation. Sonic Jam actually introduced art by Satoshi Okano, who made his own Sonic design at the time. Satoshi Okano's design of Sonic was much more dynamic and sleek than the classic Sonic, and foreshadowed his Yuakawa design that would come very soon. Actually, it was Okano's design that inspired Yuji Naka to start a new contest for a modern redesign of Sonic, because it showed the potential that a new branding for the franchise had. Yet, it wasn't Okano, the inciting factor for the contest, that won, but Uekawa. Uekawa took inspiration from Okano's dynamic style, but did it in a more safer, polished way. So now you know that between Sonic's classic and modern appearance, Okano's Sonic was a major transition point that, unfortunately, goes majorly unnoticed and uncredited by the fanbase. Let's go to another one of the weirdest and lowest quality Sonic games released that no one talks about. In 1998, Tiger Electronics released a handheld named the Game.com, and with it came its own version of Sonic Jam. But unlike the Saturn compilation, this version compresses Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Sonic and Knuckles into a single cartridge. I would absolutely not call these ports. They're more like extremely graphically and technically limited demakes. The music is terrible, the game is laggy, and it's basically unplayable. Critics trashed the motion blur, annoying looping music, and the weird collision detection. The handheld's low resolution and sluggish screen made fast platforming difficult, so Tiger made a brutally slow and simple game. Because of the hardware limitations, the sprites are smaller, and there are fewer enemies on screen. Sonic speed is reduced, making it feel like playing in slow motion. The music loops abruptly, and the screen suffers from ghosting, which smears the graphics when you move quickly. Of course, it is an ambitious port for trying to squeeze 3 16-bit games into such a limited handheld, and for the unfortunate kids who only owned a Game.com, this was their only way to experience Sonic's early adventures. Ultimately, Sonic Jam on the Game.com is a morbid curiosity rather than a must-play. It's a relic of a time when many companies tried to capitalize on the portable gaming craze without matching Nintendo's quality. Many talk about the boringness of Sonic Labyrinth or the brokenness of Sonic 2006, but I don't think there is a single more unplayable Sonic product out there than this version of Sonic Jam. Ironically, I would still argue that the physics here are more faithful to the classics than Sonic 4. Not good, but they at least tried, which is funny. You might remember a third Sonic cartoon from the late 90s, Sonic Underground, from 1998. Produced by Dicey and its French studio, it imagined Sonic as one of 3 royal siblings with magical instruments. Sonic, Sonia, and Manic formed a rock band while searching for their missing mother, Queen Alina, to fulfill a prophecy. Each sibling's amulet turned into an instrument, and together they made music to fight Robotnik's forces. The show ran for 40 episodes, and none of its elements were ever revisited. Its soundtrack and unique premise have gained a cult following, but most Sonic fans just think it's more weird than anything. People just seem to remember the bizarre episode where Knuckles appeared and was very badly animated. But there's a lot more stuff than that. Someday, you should gather the courage to glimpse some episodes of this chaotic and flawed masterpiece. What ties all these facts about Sonic's classic era together is the spirit of experimentation and attitude that defined Sonic's early years. From time travel and lock-on cartridges to comics and cartoons tie-ins, Sega wasn't afraid to push boundaries. The classic games emphasized speed, but also exploration, secret levels, visual storytelling, and rivalries. They introduced a cast of colorful friends and foes, each with unique abilities and backstories. Even decades later, recent titles like Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars continue to evolve the foundations set by this era. But as gaming was transitioning into a new age, so came the time for Sonic to make the jump into 3D with the Dreamcast. And Sonic had an incredible transition into 3D. We'll now talk about hidden facts from Sonic's Adventure and Dark Age era, from 1998's Sonic Adventure all the way up to 2009's Sonic and the Black Knight. This is considered by many the deepest and most intricate era of Sonic, and with their stories full of heart and meaning, it's easy to understand why. Let's begin. In Sonic Adventure's development, the designers wanted a villain unlike anything fans had seen before. So they dug up an old concept from the cancelled Sonic Extreme and refined it into Chaos, a monstrous water spirit. The idea was to have an antagonist that looked and felt like living water, with a translucent body to highlight the new hardware powers of the Sega Dreamcast. Chaos was even intended to have realistic blue scales in his final form, but this was abandoned because it was a bit too much to ask from the Dreamcast's technology. That constraint actually made the design creepier. Chaos's glassy surface and changing limbs feel alien, especially as he absorbs Chaos Emeralds and grows. It's wild to think the series quickly transitioned from cartoonish villains to this surreal water hydra. You have to admire Sega for experimenting so hard in its first fully 3D Sonic game. Also, if you agree that Chaos feels alien, that's not a coincidence. Chaos is actually a KO from ancient times that went through a mutation upon entering in contact with the Master Emerald. This is especially relevant because Sonic Frontiers basically confirmed that the KO are aliens. The KO are actually the descendants of the Ancients, beings which arrived on Sonic's planet millennia ago and their homeworld was destroyed, and somehow evolved into the cute form of the KO. This is why the Ancients we see in Sonic Frontiers are so similar to Chaos. When Chaos gained his mutated form, his appearance became similar to the civilization that predated him, acting as a throwback to the Ancients' original genetics. It's very interesting to think about how the later games recontextualized earlier ones. For the first time in the series, Sonic Adventure featured extensive voice acting. Sonic Team deliberately avoided the usual Japanese talent pool, hoping to give the characters a more cinematic feel. They cast Junichi Kanemaru, partly because he could speak English, and then hired film and stage actors for the supporting roles. When the game was localized, Sega of America brought in Ryan Drummond and a new American cast, ensuring the characters sounded natural to Western audiences. Some players loved the added personality of Sonic being fully voiced, while others thought hearing Sonic talk so much was weird. But Sonic's talking has been a staple for so many decades that this complaint was kind of muted out over time. There's also the charming awkwardness of early game voice direction. Sometimes characters talk over each other, or the lip sync is way off. When developers were initially conceptualizing Sonic Adventure for the Saturn, it was originally thought of as a RPG game with a big focus on story, taking inspiration from the huge trend that was the success of JRPGs at the time. You can tell that this creative spark lived on in the final product. Sega deeply cared about presenting a more cinematic story, and that ambition bled into everything, from the cutscenes to the elaborate real-world environments. Which brings us nicely to the lengths Sonic Team went to make Sonic Adventure feel like a real adventure. To give Sonic Adventure a sense of place, the developers actually left the studio and traveled to real-world locations. They visited Mesoamerican ruins in Cancun, Guatemala, and Peru, taking photographs of ancient stonework and lush forests. They then scanned these textures into the game, which is how areas like the Mystic Ruins and Lost World feel so grounded. The Echidna girl, Tikal, is even named after the Guatemalan ruins of the same name. Sonic Team also invested in cutting-edge graphics hardware. They built the game on PCs equipped with the then-advanced Voodoo 2 graphics cards to prototype their Dreamcast visuals. Imagine the team huddling over these bulky PC towers, testing how water reflections rendered or how jungle ruins might look at dusk. The mixture of field research and technology paid off. Even today, Sonic Adventure's environments have a warm, almost painterly quality. When I was a 7-year-old kid playing this game, everything felt deeply real and immersive. I felt like I got lost in the game's environments and forests. I'm sure that this is all thanks to the developers' insane passion and attention to detail. The decision to anchor the game in real places also gave the story emotional heft. Speaking of making 3D work, the team faced some unique challenges when they took Sonic's 2D speed into 3 dimensions. Translating Sonic's trademark speed to 3D was a nightmare for the developers. The designers quickly learned that if they let players run freely, they'd constantly fall off platforms and get lost. That's why they split stages into multiple sections and added the homing attack, which auto-locks onto enemies so you don't overshoot them when jumping. They also broke each character's levels into shorter segments and repurposed them across the 6 playable campaigns to save time. Camera control was another beast. With Sonic moving so fast, it was hard to find an angle that didn't induce nausea. So in the end, they opted for semi-scripted camera paths, which worked out the best. Hub worlds were inspired by The Legend of Zelda, allowing players to explore and find upgrades between action stages. The most unexpected addition, the Chaos Racing system, an evolution of the A-Life artificial intelligence from nights into dreams. By raising digital pets on the KO Garden and watching them compete in races, players could enjoy a slower, Tamagotchi-style side activity that created surprising emotional attachment. This focus on multiple playstyles and emergent storytelling would return in the sequel. The KO became a surprisingly deep side game. Upon hatching, each KO had hidden genes that determine its personality, appearance, and stats. You could feed them animals found in levels to evolve wings, horns, or even halos. If you were playing on the Dreamcast, you could transfer your KO to the tiny screen on the VMU and raise them on the go. Fans soon discovered that KO could reincarnate if treated well. This led players to obsess over creating the Chaos KO, an immortal angelic KO that required multiple reincarnations. It's fascinating how Sonic's first big 3D outing also birthed one of gaming's earliest digital pet communities. Sites like KO Island became huge databases dedicated to this side game present in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, which Sega unfortunately still never brought back. And if taking inspiration from JRPGs and Tamagotchi wasn't enough, Sega soon attempted its own Mario Party competitor on the Dreamcast. Few fans know that Sonic's first game outside a Sega console came out before Sega became a third-party developer. Well, of course, there was Sonic Jam for the Game.com we just mentioned, but that can barely be considered a playable game. On these terms, Sonic Pocket Adventure was actually the first one. Sonic Pocket Adventure for the Neo Geo Pocket Color is often described as Sonic 2 on a handheld, and that's not far off. Released December 4th, 1999 in the US, it was developed by a small SNK team that would later become DIMPS, the developers of the Sonic Advance and Rush series. So, in a way, this game is a predecessor to Sonic Advance. The game combines elements from Sonic 2 and 3 and feels like a greatest hits remix designed for the handheld's crisp color screen. Gameplay is faithful to the Genesis originals. You can use momentum-based physics to traverse levels. Hidden puzzle pieces unlock images in a photo gallery. Special stages, yet again accessed via star posts with 50 rings, are reminiscent of Sonic 2's half-pipe. Gather all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and you get a good ending. Unlike the Game Gear games, there's no slowdown and the controls are tight. What makes Pocket Adventure interesting is its cross-company lineage. SNK developed it under license from Sega as part of a collaboration to boost the Neo Geo Pocket's profile. The result is a game that feels official, yet unique. The music remixes tracks from Sonic 3 and Sonic 2, and there's even a multiplayer race mode via link cable. Sadly, the Neo Geo Pocket Color's short life means many missed this gem. If you can track down a copy or play it via emulation, it's a delightful portable Sonic game that still stands up today. Sonic Shuffle is a board game-style party game co-developed by Sonic Team and Hudson Soft, the same studio behind Mario Party. Despite that pedigree, the game struggled due to confusing minigame rules, long load times, and a sometimes cheating AI. Story-wise, it has some pretty crazy stuff. Sonic and friends are transported to Imaginary World, where the villain Void shatters the Precious Stone, and Lumina Flowlight asks them to restore it. In the end, it's revealed that Lumina and Void are two halves of the same goddess, Illumina, who split when the precious stone broke. The gameplay uses a deck of magical cards with numbers 1 through 6 and special Eggman cards that cause misfortune. Players move around giant boards collecting precious stones, battling monsters via roulette mechanics, and earning force jewels that grant powers. There are around 50 minigames and 30 mini-events, but their rules aren't always clear, adding to the game's divisive reputation. Shuffle remains a curious footnote, a rare attempt at a Sonic party game that dives into surreal lore while also being notoriously unpolished. And while Sonic Shuffle was lighthearted, Sonic Adventure's sequel took a darker turn, driven by a dramatically smaller team. Long before the convenience of the modern Google Play and App Stores, Sega launched Sonic Cafe in 2001, a mobile game service in Japan. Users paid a monthly fee of 315 yen to access and download any available game an unlimited number of times. The service was available on Japanese mobile networks, although some games eventually appeared on Sega Mobile outside Japan. Sonic Cafe itself remained Japan exclusive. The service offered a wide range of titles, from simple puzzle games like Sonic Puyo Pop and bowling or action games like Sonic Jump and Sonic Sprint. New titles were added regularly and could be downloaded directly over the air. The idea was ahead of its time. It was a subscription model for mobile games years before Apple Arcade or Xbox Game Pass. Because the Java-powered phones varied in capabilities, many games were designed to scale to different screen sizes and input methods. Although the graphics and sound were simple, Sonic Cafe demonstrated Sega's willingness to experiment with emerging technology. It also served as a testing ground for gameplay ideas that would later appear in standalone mobile releases. For Western fans, this service remains a fascinating and mysterious footnote, an early example of mobile game subscription and a reminder that Sega once led the pack in mobile innovation. Sonic Adventure 2 was made under very different circumstances. Sega downsized the studio after the Dreamcast struggles and moved much of Sonic Team to San Francisco. Sega wanted to repeat the pattern of developing a game in Japan and its sequel in the US, as it had been successful with the original Sonic 1 and 2. A core group of just 11 people worked on the sequel, significantly smaller compared to Adventure's team of 120. Writer Shiro Miyakawa wanted a substantial portion of the story to take place in space, because this would be the first Sonic game released during the 21st century. Miyakawa drew influence from the manga and anime he had enjoyed since childhood, including Please Save My Earth, specifically for the scenes in which Maria looks at Earth from the space colony arc. All this led to the creation of Shadow, a black hedgehog originally called Terios, which means reflection. Early sketches envisioned him in chains, locked away in a pod. Miyakawa liked the idea of a rival who mirrored Sonic but had a tragic past. The tiny team had to juggle art, programming, and story duties, which is why some levels have reused assets. Yet, this lean crew produced one of the most ambitious Sonic stories ever, blending themes of revenge, sacrifice, and government conspiracy. They feared that this could be the last Sonic game to be ever made, and so they gave their all in every aspect of it. The plot itself is a roller coaster. Adventure 2 introduces Gerald Robotnik, Eggman's grandfather, who created the ultimate life form and built the space colony Ark. Shadow wakes up thinking his purpose is to fulfill his friend Maria's dying wish by bringing doom to Earth. So he teams up with Eggman to steal the Chaos Emeralds. Eggman threatens to fire the colony's Eclipse Cannon at the planet if the world doesn't surrender to him. But it turns out, Gerald had installed a failsafe that would cause the Ark to crash into Earth once all the emeralds were gathered. Sonic and Shadow end up working together, transforming into their super forms and taking down the Bio-Lizard to stop the collision. Shadow's arc culminates in him realizing Maria wanted him to protect humanity, not destroy it, leading to his apparent sacrifice at the end of the game. The story is almost operatic, with gun soldiers gunning down innocents, secret journals, and a hedgehog giving his life to save the world. It felt so bold at the time. Even if Sonic Adventure 1 had already touched a bit on deeper themes with Tikal's and Chaos' story, Adventure 2 went much, much crazier. You were used to beating Eggman and going home, not dealing with themes like state violence and scientific hubris. In the early 2000s, with Sega becoming a third-party developer, Sonic, a longtime mascot that rivaled Mario, suddenly appeared on Nintendo's Game Boy Advance. Sonic Advance lets fans experience classic side-scrolling action on portable hardware. You could choose from 4 characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, each boasting signature moves. Amy specifically had a very different playstyle, using her hammer to attack enemies instead of curving into a ball. The game had the exact same physics and gameplay style of the Genesis classics, but also integrated the tiny KO Garden, a smaller version of the KO Garden from the adventure games. You could feed your KO fruit, play mini-games to earn rings, and watch the little creature level up. Players could now raise adorable KO on their handheld and even transfer them to the GameCube's Sonic Adventure KO Gardens via the link cable. This cross-platform connection felt novel in 2001, showing Sega's willingness to embrace Nintendo hardware. Raising a KO on the handheld and then seeing that same KO swim in glorious 3D on a television felt magical. The garden's presence across multiple games created a sense of continuity and kept players invested between platforming sessions and game releases. Even without beating the main story, you could spend hours nurturing your virtual pet. This blending of platforming and pet raising was ahead of its time and hinted at Sega's experimental streak. Although later handheld Sonic games dropped the garden, many fans still fondly remember the soothing music and simple joy of caring for a pixelated KO. It was like having a tiny piece of Sonic Adventure's world in your pocket. For many, Sonic Advance was their first time playing a Sonic game without a Sega console. The crisp pixel art, catchy music, and great controls made it an instant classic, setting the stage for more handheld adventures. Even the challenge of collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds remained, ensuring dedicated players could unlock an exclusive secret ending with Super Sonic. If you've ever played the tiny KO Garden minigames or dashed through Neo Green Hill Zone, you know how charming this debut was. Since Sonic would now be outside of Sega's consoles, the company wanted to introduce a new generation to Sonic's 16-bit adventures. Sonic Mega Collection on GameCube and its expanded Mega Collection Plus version for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC compile classic games through emulation. Sonic Team aimed to offer high-resolution manuals, comic art, and videos so players could learn the history behind the games. The Plus version adds 6 Game Gear titles and allows mid-level save states, making the old games more accessible. The base collection included Sonic 1, 2, 3, Sonic and Knuckles, the lock-on combination Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, and Sonic 3D Blast. Unlockables amusingly include Flicky and Restart. Mega Collection Plus adds titles like Sonic Drift 2 and Sonic Triple Trouble, but removes the video gallery, while adding additional concept art and character renders. Critics praised the value of the collection, but lamented the absence of Sonic CD and the tedious unlocking requirements. Despite its flaws, Mega Collection was many players' first introduction to the classic series. The colorful menu and extras like a digital comic viewer show Sega's effort to present Sonic as more than just a game. Of course, everyone remembers the extremely nostalgic soundtrack of the menus and title screen of this collection. It's one of the legendary pieces of Sonic music out there. The success of this collection paved the way for the later Sonic Gems collection, focusing on rarer titles. Still on the Game Boy Advance, Sonic Advance 2 aimed to be faster and bigger than its predecessor. The game's biggest new addition was the boost mechanic, something that was later inherited by Rush and even the mainline 3D games. Here it was still an experimental version of it. It was not a button you could press, but an acceleration state when you maintain speed for enough time. The levels are way more focused on getting high speed and keeping it than the more faithful to the classic style of Sonic Advance 1. The levels are huge and feature multiple routes, encouraging speedrunning and exploration. Handling the high speeds and reflexes with the smaller Game Boy Advance screen could be frustrating sometimes. To help newcomers handle the higher difficulty of this entry, Dimps introduced Cream the Rabbit and her KO companion, Cheese. Cream can fly by flapping her ears and can send cheese to attack enemies, making the game significantly easier. Each character has unique moves. Collecting 7 special rings scattered in each zone unlocks 3D special stages where you grab Chaos Emeralds. Just like Sonic Advance 1, there is an extra tiny KO garden where you can raise KO on your GBA. Dream was originally designed for Sonic Heroes, but since Sonic Advance 2 would come out earlier, they made it an introductory story for her. Sonic Adventure 2's blend of blistering speed and character variety foreshadowed later handheld entries, but the handheld experiments weren't just platformers. Sega also dipped into other genres, including going back to pinball once again. Released in 2003 for the Game Boy Advance, Sonic Pinball Party celebrated Sonic Team's entire catalog. Developed by Jupiter and Sonic Team, it includes tables not only based on Sonic, but also on Nights into Dreams and Samba de Amigo. The Sonic table features KO eggs that hatch and evolve for bonus points, with Ring Mode and Egg Mode letting you collect rings or fight Dr. Eggman. The Night table lets you collect Idea and battle Nightmare and bosses, while the Samba table transforms the pinball game into a rhythm challenge where you time flipper presses to the music. Interestingly, Sonic Pinball Party was released exclusively at Target stores in North America. Fans in Canada and Mexico complained because Target didn't operate there, so the game became a hard-to-find collector's item until Sega packaged it with Sonic Advance in a combo pack. The story mode has Sonic entering the Egg Cup tournament at Casinoopolis to free his brainwashed friends and animals. It's a quirky title that manages to reference multiple Sega franchises. Sonic N brings Sonic Advance to Nokia's ill-fated N-Gage. Released as a launch title in October 2003, it's essentially the GBA game running on the N-Gage's vertical screen. Players can choose between a letterboxed view, preserving aspect ratio with black bars, or a full-screen mode that squishes the image. This attempt to adapt a horizontal platformer to a vertical display still felt incredibly awkward to play though. The port retains Sonic Advance's core, 4 playable characters, momentum-based platforming, and colorful visuals. However, due to storage limitations, features like the tiny KO garden and multiplayer via link cable were removed. The sound effects are lower in pitch and some music tracks are missing. Critics gave the port mediocre scores, citing a choppy frame rate, cramped screen, and wasted potential given the N-Gage's online capabilities. Still, Sonic N is a fascinating artifact. It shows how developers were still experimenting on how to bring console-quality games to early smartphones. Honestly, the fact that Sega let Nokia use its mascot underscores just how much Sonic went multi-platform after Sega exited the hardware business. When it turned out Adventure 2 wasn't going to be the last Sonic game, and the series would continue as Sega turned into a third-party developer, it was decided the next game should have a more friendlier, introductory tone to immerse new fans into Sonic's universe. Which leads us to the nostalgic Sonic Heroes. Sonic Heroes marked almost a reboot for the brand, with great care taken on how to bring Sonic to the audiences of Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox consoles. Even though Sonic Heroes doesn't follow the exact same style of the adventure games, it's still considered an adventure-era game. Even the upcoming Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 2006 still can be considered adventure-era games, as Sonic's gameplay shift into the Boost era would only come with Sonic Unleashed later on, so keep that in mind. Takashi Iizuka, the director of Sonic Heroes, actually relocated to San Francisco and volunteered to form Sonic Team USA to oversee the brand. He felt that working in America would help the team better understand Western players' taste and prevent Sonic's image from being misused in other media like comics and cartoons. Sonic Team USA started with only 19 staffers, most of whom Iizuka personally persuaded to move from Japan. While he enjoyed the freedom to focus on game development away from managerial duties, he struggled with English emails and missed Japanese ramen. During this period, Sonic X began airing, introducing a whole new generation of American kids to the blue blur. It was an attempt to create a cultural feedback loop between the games and TV show, much like how the Pokemon anime strengthened the game series. This trans-Pacific approach not only influenced character portrayal, but also meant localizing decisions could happen more quickly. Sonic Heroes' core gimmick was its team system. Each of the 4 squads, Team Sonic, Dark, Rose, and Chaotix, has a speed, power, and flight member. You swap between characters on the fly, combining their abilities to traverse stages. Skeptics worried this constant switching would break the game's flow, but the developers found it added energy and allowed them to integrate the variety of Sonic Adventure's multiple campaigns into a single run. Personally, I think the team system can be quite a bit overwhelming when you pick up the game for the first time, but when you get used to the rhythm of it, creates a very unique and satisfying style of Sonic gameplay that isn't replicated in any other game in the series. Voiced chatter between the characters serves both as hints and banter, further humanizing the team dynamics. Designing levels for the system was hard. The team had to create sections that catered to speed characters' loops, power characters' combat, and flyers' vertical paths without making the switching feel like a chore. When it clicks, you get a sense of camaraderie and rhythmic gameplay rarely felt in previous entries. One of Sonic Heroes' most entertaining teams is Team Chaotix. Vector the Crocodile, Espio the Chameleon, and Charmy Bee. They run a sleuthing business and accept a mysterious job over the radio because Vector can't turn down a paid gig, even if Espio is skeptical. Unlike the other teams that just need to race to the goal, Chaotix stages involve things like collecting hermit crabs or destroying golden turtles. Each member brings a unique skill. Espio can turn invisible to sneak past lasers, Charmy uses flowers to warp across stages, and Vector can breathe fire or bite through obstacles. These quirky objectives can sometimes be difficult or confusing, but thankfully nowadays we can all search online where to find that last damn crab. This kind of thing shows that Sonic games aren't afraid to experiment with non-traditional gameplay when it suits the story, even if the results aren't completely perfect. Sega's first major 3D Sonic game, Sonic Adventure, received a director's cut when ported to GameCube in 2003 and PC in 2004. Sonic Adventure DX promised enhanced graphics, a KO garden updated to the standards of Adventure 2, 60 optional missions, and a gallery of unlockable Game Gear titles. However, despite these additions, the port is actually considered to have downgraded the game's visuals and introduced many new glitches and issues, which would unfairly harm the reputation of the original game. Among the changes was that the Dreamcast's dynamic lighting system was replaced, making the atmosphere of stages and cutscenes completely flat. Textures appear blurrier on the GameCube, and some background objects still use low-resolution Dreamcast assets. Some features, like the VMU-based KO downloads and online leaderboards, were omitted. Despite the Director's Cut label, there was basically no new story content. Most importantly, the game's physics and collision became much glitchier, leading people to think that Adventure 1 is a buggy, frustrating game, when in reality, the original Dreamcast version was much more stable. Reviews for Sonic Adventure DX were mixed, praising the content value but criticizing the sloppy porting. On PC, the Steam version has gained a completely fan-made restoration mod to the original Dreamcast state of the game, which basically saved the reputation of Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure DX is a reminder that remasters should at least be on par with the original game's quality, and not be a strict downgrade. Sonic came back into mainstream TV with Sonic X, a 2003 anime produced by TMS Entertainment and Sega. The show ran for 78 episodes total. The premise begins when Sonic and friends are accidentally transported to Earth via Chaos Control, landing in the backyard of young human Chris Thorndike, stranded in a modern city. Sonic must adjust to human society while battling Dr. Eggman, who has also made the trip. The show balances action with slice-of-life moments. If you ever wondered what would happen if the fastest creature alive ended up living with a wealthy human family, Sonic X explored that fish-out-of-water concept with plenty of humor and heart. Sonic tries to escape paparazzi, Tails befriends inventor Chuck, and Amy goes shopping. American localization by 4Kids changed the soundtrack and much of the characters' dialogue, becoming a widely criticized adaptation by fans. But the anime nonetheless introduced many Western audiences to Sonic's wider world. One of the biggest problems with the localization was how it dealt with Chris Thorndike. It actively cut out scenes detailing Chris's troubled childhood and past, making it difficult for fans that only watched the Western version to empathize with the struggles of the character. This led Chris Thorndike to become one of the most hated Sonic characters, but the reality is that the theme of the character is really good, as Sonic helps to mature and have the courage to act as himself and do whatever he wants, core elements of Sonic's philosophy of freedom. Sonic X was a carefully crafted project. The series was created primarily for Japanese audiences, with Yuji Naka, co-creator of Sonic, serving as executive producer. Character designs were handled by Satoshi Hirayama, who translated Yuji Uekawa's art to easier-to-anime designs. The team deliberately chose to draw inspiration from Japanese animation, rather than Western styles to appeal to local audiences. CGI was used sparingly, originally, notably to animate Sonic's homing attacks, blending 2D and 3D techniques. The singer for the Japanese opening song, Sonic Drive, was Hironobu Kageyama, the same singer for the Dragon Ball Z openings. These production tidbits highlight just how much effort was put into Sonic X, balancing familiar game lore and characters with its own unique style. The show's success worldwide demonstrated Sonic's cross-cultural appeal and set the stage for future multimedia ventures. If you've ever wondered what goes into adapting a video game mascot for anime, Sonic X is a fascinating case study. When the first Sonic X trailer aired, eagle-eyed fans noticed a shadowy hedgehog with glowing eyes, prompting wild speculation across the fanbase. This character, which fans started calling Nazo, which means mystery, appeared to confront Sonic and was surrounded by swirling chaos energy. Fans theorized that he might be a new villain. However, years later, on April 20th, 2015, Sonic Team producer Takashi Iizuka clarified the character was simply Supersonic in its early contour. Nevertheless, fans are pretty distrusting of this claim. It doesn't make sense, because Supersonic is introduced and shown before Nazo appears in the trailer. And Nazo has way too many different features from Sonic. His arms and stomach aren't separate from his fur, he doesn't have a muzzle, and his eyes are a different shape. So fans still deny the official explanation and keep theorizing about what Nazo actually was supposed to be. A lot of people believe it's actually Hypersonic for the first time in a modern form. While he is not white or changing color, it could definitely be seen as a reimagined modern Hyper form. It could be a separate Sonic transformation entirely. Just like Dark Sonic appears in the Metarex saga, Nazo could have been something like Light Sonic or Hero Sonic, paralleling the hero and dark sides of Sonic Adventure 2. He also could have been a new character or villain, just like fans imagine. There are, nonetheless, some legal troubles involving ownership of certain aspects of Sonic X, so whether he was supposed to be a new form or a new character, maybe the TMS studio is the one that owns him, not Sonic Team, so Iizuka may not be allowed to share info about it. Despite Nazo not appearing outside of that trailer, fan art and fanfiction keep the legend alive. A famous Sonic animation called Nazo Unleashed has incredible story and fight scenes with Nazo as a fully fledged antagonist. The mystery surrounding the unused design illustrates how Sonic's fandom loves to imagine alternate timelines and hidden lore. It also shows how some few ambiguous seconds of a trailer can inspire years of speculation. When Sonic X was localized for American television, it was handled by 4Kids Entertainment. The localization involved replacing the original Japanese soundtrack and editing the content and pacing of many scenes. Some episodes were rearranged, and cultural references were altered to be more familiar to Western audiences. For example, Japanese text on signs was replaced with English, and scenes deemed too violent were toned down. These changes sparked debates among fans about preserving original intent. The voice actors for the games were also replaced by the 4Kids voice actors, since Sega wanted the brand to have consistency in its voices across media. These iconic voice actors like Jason Griffith would go on to voice the characters in games for years, but many fans still missed Ryan Drummond in the previous cast. If you've ever debated which Sonic voice actor is the definitive one, Sonic X localization is at fault for this discussion being a thing. While purists prefer the original Japanese version, many Western fans grew up with 4Kids voices and soundtrack, making it nostalgic despite its differences, and honestly, huge downsides. It's just like how if you grew up with Sonic Adventure DX for the GameCube, it will be more nostalgic for you than the Dreamcast version, even though the Dreamcast one is vastly superior. One of the strengths of Sonic X is how it adapts game storylines. The first season only follows anime original stories, with Sonic's efforts to collect the Chaos Emeralds while evading Eggman. But Season 2 adapts Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 almost beat for beat. The heroes encounter Chaos, an ancient water creature, and an adaptation of the Sonic Adventure story plays out. Adventure 2 is also adapted, including a climactic final battle against the Bio-Lizard alongside Shadow, which, in the original Japanese version, has the Live and Learn song playing in the background. A subsequent arc introduces the Chaotix Detective Agency, making the tone comedic. The anime even adapts bits of Sonic battle with the robot Emerald. What makes these adaptations interesting is the way they weave original elements into game events. Sonic X was carefully supervisioned by writer Shiro Maekawa and producer Takashi Iizuka, who were both behind the Adventure games. The Adventure 2 arc features a scene of a soldier recounting what happened at the Ark incident, including the moment he shot Maria, showing a unique angle of the story we never saw in the original game. Although some fans felt the added human character focus slowed down the action, others appreciated the attempts to explore how regular people might react to world-ending threats. If you're a fan of the Adventure games and like just how anime they feel, Sonic X delivers an adaptation full of fan service that you really need to see, especially in its original Japanese form. The final 26 episodes of Sonic X take Sonic and friends into space to fight the Metarex, a race of plant-like aliens set on stealing life from planets. They're joined by Cosmo, a plant girl whose species was destroyed by the Metarex. This season deviates from any specific game, presenting an original narrative with high stakes. The crew travels from planet to planet, collecting Chaos Emeralds and Life Seeds, while fending off Metarex generals. One of the arc's emotional highlights is Cosmo's bond with Tails, and the ultimate culmination of it. I won't spoil what happens, but it's seriously one of the most emotional moments in the entire franchise. Shadow the Hedgehog also returns, reluctantly assisting the team. The finale is surprisingly mature, dealing with themes of sacrifice and the cost of war. For viewers accustomed to the relatively lighthearted early seasons, the Metarex War arc was a dramatic and epic conclusion. If you think of Sonic only as lighthearted fun, this season will surprise you with its emotional depth. Before Sonic Advance 3 came around, a separate handheld spin-off Sonic game would build on the lore of the Advance trilogy. Sonic Battle for the Game Boy Advance tells the tragic story of Emerald, a 4,000-year-old sentient weapon known as a Gizoid. Professor Gerald Robotnik unearthed the dormant robot, but couldn't activate it. He wrote about it in his diary. Dr. Eggman later finds Gizoid, but abandons it on Emerald Beach when it won't obey him. Sonic discovers the device, names it Emerald because it can harness Chaos Emerald energy, and teaches it to fight. Emerald perfectly copies any move it sees, gradually becoming more sentient and developing bonds with Sonic, Tails, Rogue, Knuckles, Amy, Cream, and Shadow. As the group trains, Emerald's personality blossoms, but collecting Chaos Emeralds gives Emerald too much power. Eggman lures him into a new Death Egg and forces him to override his link with Sonic, causing Emerald to go berserk. Sonic is forced to fight his friend. After the battle, Emerald briefly regains his senses, thanks everyone, and explodes, scattering the Emerald shards. The game ends with Sonic telling his grieving friends that they'll see Emerald again someday. Beneath its pixelated arenas, Sonic Battle hides a surprisingly emotional tale about teaching a machine to love and then losing it. It's one of the franchise's most poignant moments. By 2004, Sega was ready to iterate on its handheld formula. Sonic Advance 3 introduced a unique team-based mechanic where you controlled two characters at once. It seemed Sonic Team wanted to create a sense of consistency with the recent release of Sonic Heroes. The roster included Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Cream, and each pairing unlocked different moves and routes. For example, pairing Sonic with Tails gave you a mid-air dash to reach high platforms, while pairing Knuckles with Cream allowed gliding combined with floaty descents. The game's design encouraged experimentation. Accessing hidden areas required trying different duos, adding replay value. Collecting rings for health was still important, and special stages were accessed through rescuing hidden KO throughout the levels. Each level had 3 acts culminating in boss fights, and players could find 7 Chaos Emeralds to unlock a true ending. The narrative of Sonic Advance 3 took a darker turn than its predecessors. Dr. Eggman harnessed the Chaos Emeralds to perform Chaos Control, but a miscalculation caused him to tear the world apart. This catastrophe split Earth into 7 floating land masses. Sonic and Tails were separated from their friends and had to reunite with Knuckles, Amy, and Cream across the fragmented world. This premise gave the game a mythic vibe. Eggman also created a new robotic assistant named Jim Earl. Depending on whether players collected all the Chaos Emeralds, the final battle could differ. If you didn't collect them, Jimmerl remained neutral. If you did, he absorbs the Emerald's power and becomes an extra boss with devastating moves. The sense of urgency in fighting against a world literally ripped apart matched the fast gameplay. When you finally defeat Eggman and reunite the world, the game rewards you with one of the most heartfelt endings in the handheld series. Sonic's team celebrates, and Jimmerl is reprogrammed to live peacefully with Cream. This story of redemption and teamwork paved the way for how later Sonic narratives would balance adventure with emotional beats. This combination of cooperative mechanics and grand scale made Sonic Advance 3 stand out from typical platformers. It's a testament to Sega's willingness to experiment within the handheld space, blending the frantic speed fans loved with strategic partner dynamics. In 2005, Sega released Sonic Gems Collection, a compilation focusing on rarer Sonic titles that weren't on Mega Collection. This collection included Sonic CD, Sonic the Fighters, and Sonic R, the first time many players could legally play these games at home since their initial releases. It also featured Tails Sky Patrol and Tails Adventure as unlockables, along with some Game Gear titles. Demos of other games, archival videos, and a jukebox rounded out the package. Gems Collection is notable for what it omits. The Western versions remove Streets of Rage and Bonanza Bros. The Japanese version retains them, making it the more complete edition. Sonic CD is presented with the US soundtrack in the West and the Japanese soundtrack in Japan, with no option to toggle between them independently of region. Sonic the Fighters runs at a steady 60 FPS, making it the definitive version until the Xbox 360 and PS3 port. Interestingly, Sonic R is based on the PC build, with slightly improved draw distance, but the same controls. This collection was a good package for the time. Even on its own, it can feel a bit bare bones, in my opinion. It's crazy that right after Sonic Heroes, such a lighthearted game, came Shadow the Hedgehog. Released in 2005, it's probably the edgiest Sonic game ever made. Shadow the Hedgehog marks the beginning of what some may call the Dark Age of Sonic. It's a period of time where Sonic games were almost always panned by critics and old-time fans. Don't let the name of the Dark Age make you forget, though, that these games slowly but surely built a fan following as younger fans grew to have a voice online. These games were never entirely bad, and sometimes were actually really good. Each of the titles of the Dark Age have their own unique strengths, and their mixed reception at launch does not discredit it. According to Sonic Retro, the idea to arm Shadow didn't come from Sega executives, but from letters written by kids who thought it would be cool if Sonic had a gun. Wanting to keep Sonic's image kid-friendly, Sega instead let Shadow be the gun-wielding anti-hero. The game's aesthetic drew inspiration from dark films like Underworld, Constantine, and Terminator, resulting in moody cityscapes. The narrative explores Shadow's deeper origin. He was created by Gerald Robotnik using Black Doom's blood and is tied to an alien invasion. Depending on your choices, Shadow can align with Gun, the Black Arms, or pursue his own path, leading to multiple endings. The gunplay divides fans. Some love the novelty, while others think it strays too far. But the multiple branching paths allowed players to piece together Shadow's backstory in different ways. In a broader sense, Shadow the Hedgehog reflects Sega's willingness to push boundaries, even if it risks alienating parts of the fanbase. The game was ridiculed back in the day, but nowadays it has a cult following. People became nostalgic for it and began focusing on its qualities instead of dismissing it just because of the absurd premise of a gun-wielding hedgehog. Speaking of pushing boundaries, Sonic Riders came about because director Takashi Yuda wanted to see Sonic ride something other than his own feet. The team considered various vehicles but settled on hoverboards because they looked cool and conveyed speed. The turbulence mechanic lets players ride slipstreams created by racers ahead to catch up. Yuda intentionally avoided referencing the City Escape board sequence from Sonic Adventure 2, wanting riders to feel fresh. Fans had been asking Sega for a new Sonic racing game, and this one delivered with its trick system and ability to grind rails. Riding Extreme Gear also freed up track design. Courses could twist into giant tubes and loops, not possible if everyone was on foot. The game's sequel, Zero Gravity, took things even further by introducing ancient technology that could manipulate gravity. And that brings us to the arcs of the cosmos and the Babylonians' extraterrestrial origins. In Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, the MacGuffins aren't Chaos Emeralds, but the Arcs of the Cosmos. These are 5 metallic ring-shaped devices built by the ancient Babylonian civilization. These stones are gravity manipulation engines and were originally part of the Astral Babylon, a spaceship powered by a black hole drive. When the drive malfunctioned, the Babylonians jettisoned the arcs, crash-landing their ship and converting it into the floating Babylon Garden. Eggman later finds one in a crater and uses a piece of it as the brain of MeteorTech Mother Computer. Once activated, the arcs send Eggman's robots into overdrive, trying to gather themselves back together. The climax sees Sonic and Jet racing to stop the Master Core, ABIS, a robot fused with the black hole energy, from destroying the planet. It's a wild bit of lore. Sonic's world was visited by spacefaring aliens whose descendants are now extreme gear racers. The game shows how deep Sonic's lore backstory can go when you start exploring ancient alien tech instead of just rings and emeralds. But that's not the only time Sonic raced through parallel dimensions. On the Nintendo DS, Sonic Rush combined 2D gameplay with 3D graphics to deliver classic speed with modern flair. The story introduced Blaze the Cat, guardian of the Soul Emeralds, whose world starts merging with Sonic's. Blaze initially fights Sonic, believing him to be a villain, but the two eventually team up to stop Dr. Eggman and his interdimensional counterpart Eggman Nega from collapsing both universes. Blaze's dignified demeanor and pyrokinesis make her stand out. Hideki Naganuma composed the soundtrack, blending hip-hop with electronica and even sampling speeches from Malcolm X, giving the game a unique vibe. It was also the last Sonic project Yugi Naka produced before leaving Sega, and the first to use the 4Kids voice cast. Sonic Rush's reception was so positive that it spawned a direct sequel focusing much more on exploration and seafaring. In Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic and Tails are whisked away to Blaze's world by a strange storm. There they meet Maureen the raccoon, an energetic girl with an Australian accent who dreams of being a captain, even though she can't steer to save her life. She and Tails build watercraft, from jet skis to submarines, which you pilot using the DS stylus. The trio confront robot pirates and their leader, Captain Whisker, uncovering a plot by Eggman and Eggman Nega to use the mystical jeweled scepter to reshape reality. The story ties back into Blaze's role as guardian of the Soul Emeralds. She and Sonic must work together again to stop the villains. Marine, conceived as a loudmouth foil, was designed to add comic relief and to broaden the cast's accents. While the seafaring minigames divided fans, the game's sense of adventure and cross-dimensional camaraderie made it a standout. The series wasn't always as praised, though. The 2006 next-gen reboot that came just a bit before this game remains infamous for many reasons. The 2006 release, simply titled Sonic the Hedgehog, often called Sonic 06, was beset by trouble from the start. Yuji Naka left Sega mid-development to form his own studio, causing a leadership vacuum. Then Sega split the team in two. One group rushed to finish the PlayStation/Xbox 360 game, while the other started a Wii port, which soon became a spin-off, Sonic and the Secret Rings. The result? Rushed production, severe bugs, and cut features like a planned day-night cycle and online multiplayer. The development used the Havoc physics engine to create realistic environments and meant to appeal to older players with a complex story. Silver the Hedgehog was originally imagined as an orange mink before being redesigned. He hails from a ruined future and believes Sonic is the Iblis trigger who will doom the world. The narrative also includes Princess Elise, who shares an infamous kiss with Sonic. Ultimately, the game ends with time resetting and erasing its own events. Sonic 06's convoluted plot and technical issues made it a lightning rod for criticism, but it remains a fascinating study in ambition gone awry. For Sonic's 15th anniversary, not only Sega released Sonic 2006, but also a Game Boy Advance remake of the original Sonic the Hedgehog called Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis. It promised portable convenience, but quickly became infamous for its terrible quality. The game suffers from severe slowdown, inconsistent physics, and glitchy collision detection. Although the GBA is capable of impressive ports, as shown by the classic Mario games, Sonic Genesis felt completely rushed. The soundtrack is out of tune, and the frame rate dips even when nothing is happening on screen. Fans were disappointed, considering this was meant to celebrate the franchise's milestone. It shows that even if some of the Dark Age Sonic games and stories were good, it is called the Dark Age for a reason. There is no way a game studio should deliver a product of such low quality. Despite its flaws, the port does include the ability to spin dash in Sonic 1, and there's an anniversary mode that increases ring counts and adds an extra control scheme. One thing I remember really liking was the fact that you could access special stages even in the third acts of zones, making it much easier to collect all the Chaos Emeralds. However, these additions can't compensate for the performance issues, and you should definitely go play basically any other version of Sonic 1 instead of this. Meanwhile, on the PSP, Sonic Rivals came out in late 2006, mixing racing with platforming. One day, a mysterious landmass called Onyx Island appeared, and Eggman Nega uses a special camera to trap Amy and Tails inside cards. Sonic and Knuckles chase him, racing through 2.5D courses, while shoving rivals, using boosts, and collecting cards that unlock costumes and artwork. The card system spans 150 collectibles, featuring cameos from across the franchise. Each character has a signature move. Sonic's Sonic Boom gives him a speed burst. Knuckles' Hammer Punch stuns opponents. Shadow's Chaos Control slows time, and Silver's Psychic Control scrambles controls. Metal Sonic is an unlockable rival whose move Copycat mimics whatever ability his opponent uses. The gameplay encourages messing with your friends as much as racing them, and the story is delightfully silly, but the sequel raises the stakes in unexpected ways. Sonic Rivals 2, released just a year later, amps up the drama by having Eggman Nega travel back in time to collect the Chaos Emeralds and unleash the Ifrit, a fire demon that will consume the world. Silver follows him from the future, while Nega powers his emerald detector with the Master Emerald and funds it with rings stolen from Angel Island. He even starts rounding up KO to feed to the Ifrit. The story pairs characters into duos with different goals. Sonic and Tails rescue KO, Silver and Espio stop Nega, Shadow works with Metal Sonic under Eggman's orders, and Knuckles and Rogue want the Master Emerald back. The final battle leaves Nega stranded in the fiery chaotic Inferno Zone. Gameplay adds a signature meter, free play mode letting you explore levels without opponents, and a battle mode with objectives like Capture the KO and King of the Hill. Cards return, unlocking outfits and cup circuits when you achieve certain ranks. Despite being on a handheld, Rivals 2 weaves a surprisingly epic tale about time travel and demons, even if a bit convoluted. Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood is notable as the only official Sonic RPG. Developed by BioWare, it begins with Knuckles being kidnapped and the Chaos Emeralds stolen. Sonic and friends meet Shade, a member of the Nocturnus clan of Echidnas, and need to stop the Grand Imperator Ix from using alien technology to conquer all dimensions after he escaped from the prison Twilight Cage. The story ends on a cliffhanger. After defeating Ix, the heroes return to Mobius only to find Eggman has rebuilt his empire, with several years having passed due to time dilation. The game ends with Eggman shooting down the Cyclone and a "The End" screen. BioWare focused on 4 pillars: story and character, turn-based combat with rhythm mechanics, progression customization via equipable items, and exploration with puzzles. The art style uses colorful, hand-drawn backgrounds reminiscent of animated shows, a deliberate choice to make the game accessible. Sega even held a contest on Sonic's official website, asking fans to name an alien race. The winning entry, Zoa, referenced Panzer Dragoon Saga. Unfortunately, a planned sequel never materialized. Sonic Chronicles lore and characters also became muddled because of a lawsuit with Archie Comics writer Ken Penders, who tried to claim ownership of his Echidna characters and stories. A sequel to the game was once seen as a possibility if the game performed well enough, with the developers having a precise idea for how the sequel should be made. However, after BioWare was acquired by Electronic Arts, plans for a sequel were dropped, and it remains the only RPG in the franchise's history. Chronicles remains a fascinating what-if. How could Sonic lore have evolved if BioWare had continued exploring ancient Echidna tribes and interdimensional politics? Instead, many of its ideas faded into obscurity. Let's talk a bit more about the Archie comics during the 2000s, and that lawsuit I just mentioned. Throughout the 2000s, Ian Flynn, who nowadays writes the main Sonic games and the IDW comics, made his debut. The series started exploring new concepts and introduced original characters such as Scourge the Hedgehog, a green Sonic rival. He actually first appeared way back in the beginning of the comics, known initially as Anti-Sonic, but his appearance and name changed. The Archie comics were known for their serialized storytelling and long-running plot threads, allowing very deep and complex character development. By the time of the 2000s, the series had already amassed a huge amount of lore and world building. The series art did get a huge downgrade for a while though, which is unfortunate, because the style from 1994 to 1997 specifically was truly beautiful. During this era, the comics were marked by major milestones and behind-the-scenes drama. One notable arc, Mobius 25 years later, jumped forward in time to show adult versions of Sonic and friends ruling Mobius. Another storyline, Interjack Reborn, reimagined Knuckles as a powerful villain, forcing Sonic to confront his best friend turned god. Outside the pages, the series faced a lawsuit from former writer Ken Penders over character ownership, which resulted in many characters and storylines being suddenly written out. These legal issues caused the comic to soft reboot, creating the in-universe phenomenon called the Super Genesis Wave. Writer Ian Flynn used the opportunity to streamline continuity. Interesting thing is, Archie after the reboot actually saw a good improvement on art quality and storytelling, especially as Ian Flynn got more creative control of the narrative of the series. The comic also launched a spin-off series, Sonic Universe, focusing on side characters and parallel stories. Through it all, the comic maintained a tone that mixed humor with high-stakes drama. If you enjoy alternate futures, epic battles, and long-form storytelling, the Archie Sonic comics delivered those thrills in abundance, despite the controversies and quality inconsistencies that shaped them. Initially, Sega intended to port Sonic 06 to the Wii, but the console's weaker hardware and unique controls led them down a different path. Sonic and the Secret Rings. Instead of free movement, players tilt the Wii remote like a steering wheel to make Sonic run along predetermined rails. The game includes 110 missions, a leveling system, and equipable skill rings that let you customize abilities. A soul gauge fills as you perform tricks. You can spend it on Speed Break, which gives you a turbo boost, or Time Break, which slows down time. The story sends Sonic into the world of 1001 Nights. He teams up with Shara, a genie, to stop the evil Eraser Jinn from consuming the pages of the Arabian Nights. Along the way, Sonic collects world rings that contain sealed emotions. Late in the game, he absorbs the rings of rage, sorrow, and hatred to become Darkspine Sonic, a purple flame-coated form that battles Eraser's monstrous true self. The development team drew inspiration from Shadow of the Colossus, Prince of Persia, and God of War for the set-piece battles, and used the PhysX engine to simulate physics. It's a weird and wonderful detour in the Sonic timeline. In 2007, gaming history was made when Mario and Sonic starred together for the first time in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. Developed by Sega under license from Nintendo, this series of sports party games allows players to compete in real-world Olympic events using characters from both franchises. Events include track and field, swimming, and gymnastics. The games have been released for Wii, DS, 3DS, Wii U, and Switch, covering the Beijing 2008, London 2012, Sochi 2014 Olympic Winter Games, Rio 2016, and Tokyo 2020. Later entries introduced online play, story modes, and new characters. Some players love the novelty of seeing Mario and Sonic characters interact. Others find the games shallow compared to dedicated sports titles. The partnership also helped mend the once heated rivalry between Sega and Nintendo. It was a reminder of how far the industry had come, and soon, the main Sonic franchise itself would be redefined yet again. Sonic Unleashed was a revolution for the series, as it marked the end of the adventure-style games. With the introduction of the boost as a core gameplay mechanic, it marks the beginning of what some may consider the boost era of Sonic, which is still ongoing nowadays. Sonic Team decided to build the Hedgehog engine. This lighting and rendering pipeline allowed them to create insanely detailed levels inspired by real-world locations, like Apato's Greek villages and Missouri's African savannas. Sonic races through these areas during daytime stages, using a boost meter fueled by collecting rings. At night, however, he transforms into the Werehog, slowing down the pace for beat-em-up combat. The Werehog concept was meant to ride the trends of hack-and-slash games at the time, like God of War, while also giving a stark contrast between day and night gameplay. There are multiple versions. PS3 and Xbox 360 have sprawling hub worlds and elaborate levels, while the PS2 and Wii versions simplify things for more straightforward exploration. It's actually basically a separate game entirely. Sonic Unleashed for PS2 and Wii is what fans call Sonic Unleashed SD, and it ends up being its own unique experience, with some fans preferring it in some aspects to the HD game. day and night cycles and traveling across continents tie into the story of Dark Gaia, an ancient beast that Eggman unwittingly awakens. Even if fans argue about the Werehog's controls, Unleashed shows Sega trying to meld platforming, combat, and global adventure into a unified whole. Alongside the console release of Sonic Unleashed in 2008, Sega Mobile released a Java version for phones. This mobile adaptation reimagines the game as a shorter 2D side-scroller. It has the same scenery, same daytime and nighttime cycles, and actual dialogue and cutscenes. Because the hardware is very limited, the levels are straightforward and the combat is simple. Despite its simplicity, the Java version gave mobile users a taste of Sonic Unleashed Grand Adventure. If you grew up during this specific time of history, you might remember downloading Sonic Unleashed and marveling at the fact you could play a new Sonic game on your flip phone. It's a charming reminder of a transitional period in mobile gaming. One of Sega's next experiments would be a new storybook-style game. The second entry in the storybook series, Sonic and the Black Knight, drops our hedgehog into Arthurian legend, summoned by the wizard Merlina to defeat a corrupted King Arthur. Sonic discovers that the Black Knight is actually a puppet. Merlina herself plans to become the Dark Queen to halt the legend's end. Sonic wields Caliburn, a talking sword that judges his worth throughout the journey. His friends appear as Knights of the Round Table. Knuckles is Sir Gawain, Shadow is Sir Lancelot, and Blaze is Percival. The game's swordplay uses the Wii Remote as a blade, with different stances and combos. It also features varying playstyles across characters and equipment upgrades. Development began right after Secret Rings, with Sega conducting focus tests on children to decide which characters would suit each knight role. It was one of the last games to use the English voice cast from Sonic X. Black Knight's story twist, that the villain isn't Arthur but Merlina's attempt to freeze time, adds a layer of moral complexity. It's considered by Sonic fans to be one of the best Sonic stories out there, especially considering how it portrays Sonic itself and his ideals. The release of Sonic Unleashed and Sonic and the Black Knight marked the end of the dark age of Sonic, the time where these ambitious and complex Sonic games would always release and be panned by critics. Sonic then entered what some may call the meta era, with much more simplified games and plots, a bigger focus on nostalgia, and self-referential jokes. Although the meta era regained critical approval for a while, it left fans who enjoyed the deeper aspects of Sonic's characters and stories disappointed. But honestly, no matter what your favorite era of Sonic is, one thing is for sure. This guy has a lot of games, spin-offs, and media, and I hope you learned many new things and obscure facts with this video. That is, if you're even still up. Comment Pingas if you got to this point of the video, in honor of the old-school Western Dr. Robotnik. If somehow you're still having a bit of trouble falling asleep, click this video right now to quietly listen to dozens of other facts about Hollow Knight, so your sleep keeps going with much more incredible lore. I'll see you there.